Chapter 34. After the hunting team left, the tribe returned to its usual pace of life. However, compared to last year, the riverside was much more lively this time. After experiencing the initial fear of the unknown creatures in the river, the people no longer feared the creatures in the river because of the benefits brought by the big-mouthed piranhas. It turned out that the creatures in the river were not so scary after all. As long as they were careful, they could get enough food. Under the joint management of Tu and Jiaba, the life in the cave was quite stable. With the daily fishing activities and enough food, the small bodies of the children were not as weak as before. At the same time, the children in the cave were getting more and more united. They had no choice but to work together to fight against the enemy. The ability of a single person was too small, and they did not even have the advantage when fishing. As for the stone worms, Xiao Xian would take Caesar to catch them every 2 days. After catching enough stone worms, they would store them for the children in the cave. Stones could not trap the stone worms. Some people used stone jars to put the stone worms in, but the next day, they found that there was a hole in the jar, and the stone worms were gone. However, Tu discovered by chance that wooden jars and straw ropes, which were not as hard as stones, could trap the worms better than stone jars. Even if they could not be trapped for too long, a day or two would not be a problem. This solved the problem of Caesar running to the cave every day. Xiao Xian still went to the training ground to look for stone cores in the morning, and went to Old Ku's place to learn the stone skills in the afternoon. After more than 10 days, Xiao Xian felt that he was much stronger than when he had just awakened his totemic power. He was also more skilled in controlling the totemic power, and could switch between the two powers in his body more freely. It seemed that learning the stone skills was also beneficial to controlling the totemic power. Xiao Xian ran through the woods like a monkey, heading towards the place he had chosen yesterday. His figure flashed, and the branches swayed slightly. The sound was very low, like a breeze. Caesar ran behind him. This place was still within the range of the tribe's guards, so Xiao Xian did not need to worry about any ferocious beasts. The reason why he deliberately controlled the sound was just for the future hunting activities. There were many times when one had to be stealthy when hunting. One had to quietly approach the prey and hide one's aura. If one's movements were slightly bigger, it would alert the prey or other ferocious beasts that one could not defeat. Xiao Xian had seen Lang Jie and Mai's stealth ability before. Mai moved stealthily, so he was still some distance away from them. Xiao Xian also saw many children who had awakened in the same batch as him, including Sai, in the mountains where he was training. "Hey, isn't that Xian?" Sai's father looked at the figure that flashed through the woods and said. For those who had not awakened their totemic power, Xiao Xian's speed was naturally very fast and hard to catch. However, for other totemic warriors who had awakened their totemic power many years ago, it was nothing. Sai jumped on the spot with a big rock in his hand. He had already jumped more than 100 times with the rock. Hearing his father's words, Sai turned his head and looked over. Xiao Xian was no longer in the woods. "What are you looking at? Keep dancing." Sai's father hit Sai's butt with a stone stick and scolded him, "You can't even beat Xian, who is 2 years younger than you." "Why can't I beat him?" Sai was not convinced. "Hey, you're still being stubborn. If I say so, then so be it. Just jump. You can't rest until you've jumped 200 times. Sai's father hit Sai twice with the stick. "I've already jumped 172 times. He just needed to jump another 28 times. Sai counted in his mind. He was a little happy when he thought about it. Should he go catch flying squirrels or look for food during the rest time? He wondered if there were any more of those green and crunchy fruits that he had eaten 2 days ago. Sai swallowed his saliva and was full of expectation. Then he heard his father say with his eyes wide open, "Do you think I don't know how to count? You've only jumped 127 times. There are 73 more. Sai was so angry that he almost threw the big rock away. However, his father's way of doing things was always right. Even if he was wrong, he had to admit it. Debate with him? He would be beaten. Damn it! Sai couldn't beat his father, so he took it out on Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian, who didn't know that he was being punished again, was busy picking stones. There were many stones in the training ground, but very few of them could be used to make stone tools. Even if he relied on his special ability to identify the grade of the stones, he couldn't find the most suitable one quickly. Because, even if it was a good stone, it might not be suitable for making stone chips. Therefore, every morning, Xiao Xian would spend a few hours picking stones, and then bring back stone cores that were good and suitable for making stone chips. After following Old Ko for a few days, Xiao Xian's ability to identify stones had improved a lot. He was no longer as clueless as he used to be, where he could see all kinds of stones the same. While Xiao Xian was looking for stone cores, Caesar was bored, so he went to stop the flying stone squirrels that were digging holes and jumping around in the mountains. Every time Xiao Xian finished picking stone cores, he would find several dead flying stone squirrels next to Caesar. Sometimes, Xiao Xian felt guilty when he looked at Caesar. Caesar was a good wolf, but he had raised him into this. In the afternoon, Xiao Xian brought the selected stone cores to Old Ko's place. Old Ko taught Xiao Xian how to determine the best angle and surface for making stone chips, and which stones were suitable for what. After that, Old Ko sat at the side and watched Xiao Xian make stone chips. After taking off his animal skin coat, Xiao Xian picked up the stone hammer and started hammering with his bare upper body. In the first few days, his animal skin coat was soaked with sweat, and water could be wrung out with a little twist. Later, Xiao Xian threw his animal skin coat aside to avoid the smell of sweat. Ding! 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 The hammering sound that would be heard every afternoon began. 1 hammer, 2 hammers, 50, 51, 100 hammers, 500 hammers. As if he didn't know what fatigue was, Xiao Xian kept knocking on the stone core. The huge stone core became smaller and smaller as more and more stone leaves fell from it than a few days ago. After hammering the first stone, Xiao Xian did not rest. He continued hammering the second stone, the third stone. After hammering the third stone, Xiao Xian felt as if he had fallen into a water tank and was fished out. After drinking some water, Xiao Xian stood at the side and listened to Old Ko explain the details that he needed to pay attention to during the grinding process. He explained the shape of the stone chips, how to grind them, and how to grind the rest of the stone core. Old Ko said that every stone had its own story. Even the best stoneware maker might not be able to decipher every stone. However, every time Old Ko explained to Xiao Xian, he would try his best to teach him everything that he had learned so far. Xiao Xian listened attentively. Many of the seemingly indifferent words actually hid many skills. After resting for a while and listening to Old Ko's teachings, Xiao Xian continued. However, he was not hammering, but grinding. Whether it was hammering or grinding, if he wanted to reach Old Ko's high standards, he had to be more careful during the grinding process. He had to control his totemic power more precisely. This was not an easy task. During the grinding process, Xiao Xian was immersed in it. All of his consciousness was focused on the stone that he was grinding. It was not obvious, but once the grinding was completed and he regained consciousness, he would feel a throbbing pain in his head. Sometimes, it would feel like he was being stabbed by an awl. It was so painful that his forehead would be covered in sweat. Old Ko said that this was normal. He had experienced this in the past. Although it was difficult, the results were obvious. Xiao Xian's control of his totemic power was more precise. Old Ko, who was sitting next to him, had a satisfied look in his eyes. Xiao Xian's growth was far beyond his imagination. After so many years, Old Ko had seen many people who learned how to grind stone, but none of them could do what Xiao Xian did. Many people might not be able to do what Xiao Xian did in half a year, or even 1 or 2 years. Of course, there were those who did it well. For example, Lang Jie took less than 50 days. Lang Ga's grandfather even showed off in front of old Ku. However, how long did Xiao Xian learn? Only 10 days. Old Ku actually wanted to go up the mountain and have a chat with the old guy who made the ground bow. However, he decided to wait a little longer, just as he was thinking about what kind of expression the old guy would have when he found out, Ku's eyes suddenly widened, as if he had seen something incredible. Totemic patterns appeared on Xiao Xian's body. This was not strange. During this period of time, when he was learning stone crafting skills, Xiao Xian would use his totemic power. Naturally, the totemic patterns on his body would also appear. However, old Ku was not shocked by the totemic patterns. What he saw in front of him was even more unbelievable than when he saw Xiao Xian use his totemic power. Everyone in the tribe knew that when a newly awakened warrior awakened by the fire pit, all the totemic patterns would appear on his body. After the ceremony, the totemic patterns would shrink. The totemic patterns that originally covered the whole arm would shrink to the upper arm, slightly over the shoulder. The totemic patterns on the legs would also shrink. Therefore, when a warrior used his totemic power after awakening, the totemic patterns that appeared would be no more than the elbow or knee. This was the sign of a beginner totemic warrior. One day, when the totemic patterns reached the elbow or knee, it would be the time for a beginner totemic warrior to become an intermediate totemic warrior. This was the most direct and effective way to identify a totemic warrior's level. When warriors were hunting, when they faced countless dangerous beasts and threats to their lives, they would make breakthroughs again and again. Only then would their totemic patterns extend. However, the extension was limited. Many people with decades of hunting experience could not extend their totemic patterns beyond the elbow or knee. In other words, they were still at the beginner totemic warrior level, and their progress was extremely slow. However, what about Xiao Xian's totemic patterns? Old Ku's eyelids twitched. He clearly remembered that when Xiao Xian first came to learn stone crafting skills and used his totemic power, the totemic patterns on his upper arm were the same as those of other newly awakened warriors. They were only slightly over the shoulder. But now, the totemic patterns on Xiao Xian's upper arm had already extended to the length of a little finger. Before this, old Ku did not pay attention to the totemic patterns on Xiao Xian's arm. Just now, he was only thinking about when Xiao Xian could become an intermediate totemic warrior. He glanced at the totemic patterns on Xiao Xian's upper arm, but he did not expect such a discovery. He could see the slightest error in the stone crafting, so how could he not see the length of the totemic patterns on Xiao Xian's arm? Don't underestimate the length of a little finger. This was something that some people could not achieve even after several years. But how long had it been since Xiao Xian awakened? At this speed, how far could a beginner totemic warrior be? Old Ku only felt his eyelids twitch even more. Chapter 35. Ku Xian rubbed his twitching eyelids and stood up from the stone bench. Since he was missing a leg, he swayed a little when he stood up. Naturally, Xiao Xian noticed him. Xiao Xian looked at old Ku in confusion as he put down the stone tool and grindstone that were about to take shape. He was in a good state just now and didn't feel like he made any mistakes. His polishing process was also up to old Ku's standards, but what was with old Ku's what the fuck look? Xian, you. Ku Xian stuttered. You. After a long while, Ku squeezed out a sentence, how do you usually train? Xiao Xian didn't know what old Ku meant, but he still explained his training schedule in detail. Of course, he didn't tell old Ku Xian about his special ability. In fact, rather than training, it was better to say that he was preparing to polish stone tools. Many of the children who had awakened at the same time were either training their strength or practicing throwing. Only Xiao Xian spent most of his time looking for stone cores. Some people even secretly laughed at Xiao Xian for not doing his job properly. After pondering for a while, Ku Xian didn't think there was anything wrong with what he said. Xiao Xian was very hardworking and showed a strong drive when he was polishing stone tools. This was also the reason why Ku Xian was willing to teach him. However, when he was learning stone tools, he also put in a lot of effort. Why didn't he improve as fast as Xiao Xian? Old Ku couldn't figure it out. He could only attribute the reason to Xiao Xian's extraordinary talent. No wonder he awakened at the age of 10. After calming down, Old Ku waved his hand and motioned for Xiao Xian to continue. He thought for a while and stopped him. He took out a wide grass curtain and divided the polishing process into 2 parts. He motioned for Xiao Xian to go to the inner part. Although confused, Xiao Xian still did as he was told. Old Ku must have his reasons for doing this. Through the grass curtain, Old Ku could see the little figure polishing stone. Old Ku slowly rubbed a stone leaf in his hand. He seemed to have thought of something and his frown relaxed. He couldn't help but chuckle. When the sun was about to set, Xiao Xian came out from the inner compartment covered in sweat and handed the polished stone tools to Old Ku for inspection. There were more stone leaves and stone cores to be polished today, so it ended much later than usual. However, Old Ku did not check the stoneware one by one like he did a few days ago. Instead, he casually pushed the pile of stoneware aside, glanced at it for a while, and then stopped looking at it. Instead, he said to Xiao Xian, "You can go back now. From tomorrow onwards, you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want." Okay, I got it. In fact, Xiao Xian had wanted to make something of his own for a long time, but his skills were too bad at that time. The things he made were completely different from what he had in mind, and he always failed halfway. Now that Old Ku said so, it was also in line with Xiao Xian's wishes. To make a satisfactory stone tool, the process involved included peeling stone leaves, polishing, pressing, heat treatment, and so on. The tools needed included hammers, pressure rods, plungers, grindstones, stone anvils, and other fixed objects. Xiao Xian didn't have a complete set of tools in his wooden house, so he could only come to Old Ku's place every day to make something. However, Xiao Xian didn't dare to think too much at first, so he started with the stone tools he was familiar with in the tribe. The next day, Xiao Xian took the stone cores he had picked for the whole morning to Old Ku's place and started polishing. Xiao Xian wanted to polish a double-winged stone arrowhead, which was the most used stone arrowhead in the tribe. Lang Jie used it a lot. Old Ku had also told Xiao Xian the essentials of making stone arrowheads. The rest could only be learned through polishing, and Old Ku would also point out some details to pay attention to. After a few days, Old Ku didn't sit next to Xiao Xian and watch him polish. He didn't need to say anything, because Xiao Xian could already do it very well. Leaning on a wooden stick, Old Ku took out a wooden box filled with all kinds of stone tools, big and small, and placed it outside the house. Inside were the stone tools Xiao Xian had polished these days. Most of them were spearheads and arrowheads, and the style of the stone tools they polished was somewhat different from Old Ku's. In the past few days, Old Ku had changed his rules. In the afternoon, he didn't let people into the house. In the morning, he would take out a lot of finished stone tools and place them on the table. If anyone took a fancy to them, they could quickly exchange them. After noon, Old Ku would pack up and enter the house. He wouldn't come out for the whole afternoon. Therefore, when they saw Old Ku putting out the things at this time, some people gathered around. "Hey, Old Ku, why are you putting things out at this time today?" "Hey, Old Ku, these things aren't made by Xian, right?" Many people knew that Xiao Xian was learning stone tools from Old Ku, but no one was optimistic about it. Some people secretly discussed how long Xiao Xian could last. Would he be like those people before him, who couldn't help but leave after a few days, or would he be forced out by Old Ku? They didn't expect him to last until now. Looking at Old Ku, he didn't seem to be angry. It was really strange. However, the person who said that the stone tools were made by Xiao Xian laughed after saying it. The people who came with him also just laughed and didn't take it seriously. After all, in their opinion, that kid had only been learning from old Ku for a few days. It was absolutely impossible for him to make such a successful stone product. They were just joking about old Ku. This stone arrowhead is well polished. It's perfect for laying bows and setting traps. Hey, the barbs are well polished. I like them. A person squatted down and began to pick out the stone arrowheads he liked. Seeing that someone had already started, the others stopped joking around and started to pick the stoneware they liked. They were afraid that the good stuff would be taken away by someone else. After all, the stoneware made by old Ku was much better than the others. Hey, old Ku, did you change your style? The arrowheads didn't have such long barbs in the past. A warrior picked out a stone arrowhead and touched the wings on it. Ku, who was sitting there, just kept a straight face and didn't answer. The warriors who came to exchange their stone tools were already used to old Ku's behavior. They didn't expect old Ku to explain. It wasn't strange for a stone tool maker to change his style. Hunting consumed a lot of stone tools. Because many of them were disposable, unlike metals, they couldn't be reused. So the scrap rate was especially high. This also led to the warriors preparing a lot of stone tools before every hunting trip. The last hunting team had been out for almost 20 days. Generally speaking, the hunting team wouldn't go out for more than 20 days. Even if they were in trouble, they wouldn't go out for more than 30 days. After all, the warriors' families were still in the tribe. If they didn't come back, their families would starve. So, after some calculations, the hunting team that went out would be back soon. The other team was also preparing. They were just waiting for the people who went out to come back. Then they would hand over the tribe's affairs and set off for hunting. Of course, the more stone tools they had, the better. They will be back in these 2 days. I saw someone bring the wounded back in the morning. This time, 2 of them were seriously injured, but their lives weren't in danger. I heard that no one died. Someone said while picking. So, we are also going to set off. I have to go back and get more things to exchange with old Ku. Didn't you say 2 were injured? Who were they? The crowd began to talk again, but their hands didn't slow down. Every time they saw a stone tool, they would grab it tightly in their hands. Those who were slower than them could only regret that they didn't make the first move. If you want to exchange, then hurry up and get out. Old Ku waved his arm with a cold face. If they wanted to talk, they should go somewhere else. Xian was still polishing in the house. What if they disturbed him? In the eyes of the crowd, old Ku was too difficult to get along with. It seemed that he didn't care about anything except stone tools. He was also very fierce when he scolded people. But in fact, old Ku valued Xiao Xian more than anyone else. When these people began to talk, old Ku was not happy and immediately drove them away. The crowd didn't get angry. They stopped talking and quickly went back to pick. When almost all the things were put on the table, no one came back. Old Ku picked up the remaining small stone tools and put them into the wooden box. He shook his head and whispered to himself, "Why don't I like these small stone tools? In fact, as long as they are used well, they are much more lethal than those big ones." When Xiao Xian finished polishing for the day and dragged his tired body back, the hunting team that went out also came back before sunset. Chapter 36. In the cheers, the hunting team walked on the path of glory, leaving long shadows in the sunset. The strong warriors were carrying much bigger prey on their backs, like an ant carrying a quail egg. They carried some on their shoulders, carried some on their backs, and even dragged some with straw ropes. The harvest was plentiful, and it was truly a rewarding journey. It was said that no one in the hunting team was killed this time, only 2 were seriously injured. The injured ones were with the shaman, and their condition had stabilized. With the strong physique of the tribesmen, it wouldn't take long for them to be able to jump around again. After a whole afternoon of non-stop grinding, Xiao Xian was too tired. After finding Lang Jie, Mai, and the others, he turned around and went back to the cabin. He didn't rush to greet them with cheers like the others. At the front of the team, Mao, who was obviously shorter than the others, was carrying 2 big wild boars on his back. He was very proud of himself. Listening to the praises from the crowd, he couldn't stop his mouth from grinning. It felt so good. He straightened his back again, and turned his head to look at the crowd, just in time to see the back of Mai and Caesar leaving. Because he was too tired, Xiao Xian didn't have much energy either. Looking from the back, he did seem to be in a bad mood. He must have been defeated by me, Mao thought. Carrying 2 big wild boars, Mao was still thinking about how to defeat Xiao Xian in the future when he joined the hunting team. After a night's rest, Xiao Xian felt full of energy. Even the soreness in his muscles had disappeared, as if he didn't persist in grinding for so long yesterday. As usual, he picked stone cores in the morning, and went to Old Ku's place in the afternoon. But today, Old Ku gave Xiao Xian half a day off, so that Xiao Xian could have some rest. Looking at the results of his grinding these days, Xiao Xian picked some stone cores and took them with him. Old Ku only took out half of the finished stoneware, and the other half was kept by Old Ku for Xiao Xian's own use. Therefore, Xiao Xian still had a lot of stoneware in stock. Xiao Xian used 2 net bags woven with straw rope to carry some of the stone tools he had selected. Then, he carried them up the mountain. When Xiao Xian arrived, Lang Jie was still sleeping. After going out to hunt, when there was no shift, he would always sleep for 3 or 4 days. What's the matter? Lang Jie yawned, his drooping eyelids almost closing. Oh, I just came to give you something. Go back to sleep. Xiao Xian placed one of the net bags on the stone table in the room and planned to leave. Originally, he wanted to listen to Lang Jie talk about hunting, but now it seemed that he had to wait for a few days. For me. Although he was sleepy, Lang Jie was still very curious about what Xiao Xian had brought. When the bag was opened and he saw the polished stone arrowheads inside, Lang Ga's squinted eyes suddenly widened. His eyes flashed as he took out an arrowhead and began to examine it carefully. Xiao Xian made the wings on the arrowhead according to the size and shape Lang Jie was used to. Therefore, the barbs were longer than the others because Lang Jie was used to using them. If he changed it without permission, Lang Jie might not be used to it, so Xiao Xian didn't add any other ideas. Lang Jie looked at the arrowheads in his hands and became more and more surprised. The arrowheads in front of him were very well polished, and the most important thing was that the wings were almost perfect. The wings of the arrowheads could play a role in balancing the flight of the arrowhead, allowing the arrowhead to hit the target more accurately. If the wings were slightly out of place, the hunting effect would be greatly reduced. In order to increase the lethality of the arrowheads, Lang Jie polished the wings of the arrowheads himself. The edges of the arrowheads were more prominent, the tips were sharp, and there were 2 long barbs. Lang Jie had always felt that only the arrowheads polished by himself were easy to use. The arrowheads polished by others, even his grandfather, might not be easy to use. But now, looking at the arrowheads in his hands, Lang Jie was very surprised. With just a glance and a weight, he knew that these arrowheads would be very easy to use. The arrowheads in his hands looked almost exactly the same as the arrowheads that Lang Jie polished himself. No, they weren't exactly the same. The arrowheads in front of him were polished more perfectly. Usually, when Lang Jie polished the arrowheads himself, because of the large demand, he didn't spend time polishing some details. But these arrowheads in front of him? Hey, Xian, thank you, I like them very much. By the way, please thank Old Ku for me. Thank him for the arrowheads he polished. In Lang Ga's opinion, these arrowheads were naturally polished by Old Ku, and Xiao Xian naturally asked for them from old Ko before sending them over. Lang Jie stretched out his thumb and touched the wings of the arrowhead. TSK, the edges of the arrowheads were very well polished. As expected of a master's product. Xiao Xian, who had just walked out of the door, turned back and smiled. I'll help you pass on the message. By the way, I polished those arrowheads myself. You can see if they're good for you when you use them. Hearing Xiao Xian's reply, Lang Jie, who was touching the arrowheads, froze. He raised his eyes and looked at Xiao Xian in astonishment, the muscles on his face trembling violently. Wait! Lang Jie strode in front of Xiao Xian, holding the arrowhead in his hand. He stared at Xiao Xian and said word by word, "You made this?" Xiao Xian nodded. "Yes, it's passable, right?" "Passable?" Lang Jie stared at Xiao Xian with bloodshot eyes. Even his breathing became heavy. If these were considered passable, then what was the point of what he was doing now? Stone slag. Xiao Xian didn't quite understand what Lang Jie meant. He had some arrowheads given by Lang Ga. Because he had used them once, Lang Jie didn't want to take them out for hunting, but it would be a waste to throw them away, so he gave them to Xiao Xian for training. When Lang Jie and the others first started training, they also used second-hand arrowheads, which was very common in the tribe. Xiao Xian's arrowheads were made according to the ones given by Lang Ga. There were some flaws on the arrowheads, but it didn't affect their use. Xiao Xian always thought that the small flaws were caused by the wear and tear of the arrowheads. After seeing them, Old Ku didn't comment on them. But for the arrowheads made by Xiao Xian himself, Old Ku commented that they were passable. This was also the reason why Xiao Xian said they were passable. Lang Jie looked at Xiao Xian with a complicated expression. Maybe it was because he had a grandfather who was a stoneware maker. He also made stoneware himself and thought that he was quite talented in stoneware. Now that he had some success, even if he couldn't catch up with his grandfather, he would definitely surpass him in 10 years. Moreover, among his peers, his ability to make stoneware was above most, especially when it came to arrowheads. Almost no one in his generation could surpass him. But now, in front of him, there was a 10-year-old kid who had just awakened and learned stoneware for less than 30 days. The arrowheads he made were actually better than his own. With his eyesight, he could naturally see that this kind of stone tool could not be made with enough time and meticulous polishing. Moreover, the arrowheads in his hand were very smooth and did not have many stagnation points. It was possible that these arrowheads were all polished in a short period of time. Why did he change so much after coming back from a hunt? I'm only going out for 20 days, not 2 years. Thinking about how he gave Xiao Xian a batch of second-hand stoneware arrowheads full of flaws before he went hunting, Lang Ga's face turned red and he wanted to bang his head into the ground. Although he was usually thick-skinned, when it came to stoneware, he was deeply influenced by his grandfather. His views and thoughts were completely different from usual. Deep breaths. Deep breaths again. Lang Jie stretched out a trembling finger and pointed outside, "You, don't come out for 3 days." After saying that, Lang Jie put down the curtain and didn't sleep. He strode to the small room where he usually used to grind stoneware and began to work. In another room next to Lang Ga's room, an old man with a head full of white hair walked out. Although he was old, his body still looked healthy and healthy. It wasn't a problem for him to carry a stone that weighed 100 pounds. This man was Lang Ga's grandfather. The old man had just taken an afternoon nap and was chewing on a piece of jerky when he was about to go down the mountain to meet some friends. When he heard the sound of stoneware grinding, he thought that one of his sons was preparing stoneware for hunting. When he turned his head, he saw his grandson, who was supposed to be sleeping soundly in his room, appear in the stoneware room through the open window. The old man was so excited that he almost choked on the jerky. His eyes were as big as stone balls. He looked at Lang Jie as if he was looking at a rare ferocious beast in the forest. Holy shit! This little bastard, every time he came back from a hunt, he would be like a softy who couldn't get up without sleeping for 3 or 4 days. How strange. Xiao Xian, who had just been yelled at by Lang Jie, "Don't come out for 3 days," was a little confused. What was wrong with Lang Jie? Did he not wake up and have low blood pressure? Shaking his head, Xiao Xian carried another net bag and walked up the mountain. Mai's place was slightly higher. Chapter 37. As an intermediate totem warrior, Mai held an important position in the hunting team. He had a lot of work to do back in the tribe, so he was not as free as Lang Ga. When Xiao Xian arrived, Mai was assigning patrol tasks to 2 warriors. Xiao Xian waited for the 2 warriors to come out before he went in. Inside the house, Mai was processing the meat he brought back. He only did some preliminary processing during the hunt, so he had to chop them into small pieces and marinate them. He also had to sort them out for other uses. "You're here." Seeing Xiao Xian enter the house, Mai waved his hand and threw a piece of bloody meat the size of a winter melon to Xiao Xian. "Take it back and eat it. You're a totem warrior now, so you eat a lot. You'll get hungry during training." Many people would reduce their training time when they were short of food. After all, once a totemic warrior started training, they would consume more energy, so naturally, they would need to eat more. Especially for warriors like Xiao Xian who had just awakened, it was the time for them to grow, so they could not lack food. "Thank you, Uncle Mai." Xiao Xian took the meat and handed the net bag to Mai. "This is for you." Mai put down the stone axe and looked at the net bag curiously. "You made it yourself?" "Well, it's definitely not as good as yours, Uncle Mai. But it's still okay." Xiao Xian scratched his head and said. Compared to Lang Ga's stone arrowheads, the ones Xiao Xian gave Mai didn't have as many stone arrowheads. Instead, most of them were spearheads for throwing during hunting. After all, the 2 of them had different responsibilities in the hunting team, so the stone arrowheads they used were naturally different. Mai had heard from Lang Jie that Xiao Xian was learning stone tools from old Ku. But it had not been long, so Mai did not expect to see many exquisite things. Xiao Xian was thoughtful enough to send him something, so he did not want to discourage this kid. Mai smiled and pulled open the net bag, intending to say some words of encouragement. "Actually, you can't rush into crafting stone tools. It's already very good that you're able to do this. In the future," his voice came to an abrupt halt. Mai looked at the well-polished spearheads in the net bag and swallowed back the words of encouragement he was about to say. The sharpened spearhead was the same as Mai's usual spearhead. Its spine was slightly higher, and the blade of the spearhead was also very sharp. The spearhead's blade gathered into a sharp point, and there were no traces of it being beaten. Clearly, a lot of effort had been put into the sharpening. Unlike the spearheads used by many warriors, the spearheads Mai like to use had grooves for drinking blood on both sides of the spine. Xiao Xian also had grooves for drinking blood. Just like Lang Jie, Mai also gave Xiao Xian a stone tool for training. It was a spear that he had used before. However, when he gave it out, he did not expect to receive such a gift in return. These, are you really polishing them yourself?" Mai looked at Xiao Xian, and saw Xiao Xian nodding. Mai then looked at the stone tools in his hands. He did not expect Xiao Xian to have such a gift. In this case, even if Xiao Xian could not improve his strength in the future, he would be able to live a peaceful life in the tribe. He would not have to starve. After being stunned for a while, Mai laughed. "Good. Very good." Unlike Lang Jie, Mai did not spend so much effort on crafting stone tools, nor did he care much about them. Therefore, when he saw Xiao Xian's stone tools, he only admired them. After putting away the spearheads, Mai asked about Xiao Xian's training during this period, and gave some suggestions. He did think highly of Xiao Xian, but he also agreed that the newly awakened ones should train more. There was no need to rush to join the hunting team. Otherwise, they would be like Hoodlum, who was too eager for success. However, when the time came, they would make a lot of mistakes and become a burden. After thinking for a while, Mai reached out his hand and said to Xiao Xian, "Punch my hand, and let me see your strength." After a totemic warrior's ability was improved, his strength would continue to increase. That was why Mai wanted to use this method to see Xiao Xian's results during this period of training. However, he did not expect Xiao Xian to improve much. After all, Xiao Xian had spent most of his time making stone tools. Okay. Xiao Xian put aside the meat in his hand, and stretched his arms and legs. In fact, he did not know how different he was from the other kids, except for his special ability. He also did not know what level he was at now. It would be good for his future training if he could get some advice from Mai. Since he wanted to test his fist strength, he had to use his totemic power. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Xian mobilized the totemic power in his body. Immediately, clear totemic patterns appeared on his face, and quickly spread from his face to his neck. Mai was satisfied to see Xiao Xian mobilizing his totemic power so quickly. He was much better than the other kids who had been preparing for a long time. Xiao Xian suddenly stomped on the ground with his right foot, and rushed towards Mai at a high speed. He punched Mai's hand. Bang! The fist hit the palm, but it was like a collision between rocks. Xiao Xian felt as if he had hit a hard steel wall, which was completely different from the rock he had hit in his training. Xiao Xian staggered back 2 steps, and took back his fist. He grinned and rubbed his fist. Actually, it wasn't just his fist that was hurting. His entire arm was aching. Sure enough, there was such a big difference between a newly awakened totemic warrior and an intermediate totemic warrior. Looking at Mai, he looked like he had just hit a piece of tofu, and his hand was not even red. Xiao Xian also noticed that the totemic patterns on Mai's body had indeed gone past his elbow, and some of them had even spread along his forearm. Unlike him, his totemic patterns had just gone past his shoulder. In fact, Mai was not so calm. He looked at Xiao Xian in surprise. Compared to the pain in his hand, he had seen the totemic patterns on Xiao Xian's shoulder, but now they had disappeared. He did not know if it was an illusion, but Xiao Xian's punch was indeed stronger than most of the newly awakened totemic warriors. Winter was over, and the weather was getting warmer. The temperature was rising day by day, and he had to train every day. For convenience, Xiao Xian was now wearing a sleeveless animal skin coat, so the totemic patterns on his shoulder were naturally exposed. Maybe Mai did not have old Ke's eyesight, but compared to most people, he was much better. Again. Use all your strength. Mai said to Xiao Xian. Seeing that Mai had other ideas, Xiao Xian did not hesitate. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Xian mobilized the totemic power in his body again. In his mind, the flames wrapped around the horns suddenly grew, and the totemic power was mobilized to the limit. Feeling the surging power flowing through every muscle and every bone, Xiao Xian's mental state reached its peak in an instant. After working on stone tools for so long, his precise control of the totemic power had shown its advantage. He was very familiar with the instantaneous accumulation of power, and he could feel it every day. Every time this happened, Xiao Xian would have a strong sense of confidence. At the same time, the flame patterns on Xiao Xian's body became abnormally bright, and he could almost feel the burning heat of the flames. The moment he exerted force on his leg, the ground trembled slightly. Whoosh! Before the punch arrived, the wind from the punch had already arrived. Although Xiao Xian was only a junior totem warrior who had just awakened, and he hadn't trained his strength to the extreme, the sudden explosion of his fist brought about an unparalleled momentum. Looking at the kid in front of him who only reached his waist, Mai's eyes widened slightly. Bang! A clear cracking sound could be heard. Xiao Xian suddenly felt a sharp pain in his entire arm, as if he was being roasted on a bonfire. The burning pain was endless. Mai's face even stiffened for a moment, but soon returned to normal. However, he was still shocked. He stared at Xiao Xian, and did not withdraw his outstretched hand for a long time. Xiao Xian, who was pushed back a few steps by the recoil, waved his arms and made a hissing sound. He didn't expect it to be so painful. Compared to the feeling of the last punch, the difference was not just a little bit. Xian. Mai said with some difficulty. Ah. Xiao Xian waved his arm, and looked at Mai. He was not worried about his arm. Even if it was broken, it would heal in a few days. This was the advantage of the tribesman's physique. You go back, and get ready. Hearing Mai's words, Xiao Xian wondered if Mai would tell him not to come out for 3 days, just like Lang Jie did. He continued to look at Mai, waiting for him to continue. Get ready, and go hunting with us next time. Huh. Chapter 38. Xiao Xian looked at Mai in surprise. He did not expect Mai to say something like that. Didn't they agree that he would only be allowed to come with them next time? Why did he change his mind? Was it because of the punch just now? Okay. Xiao Xian answered. Xiao Xian was more than willing to go out with the hunting team next time. The forest changed every day, and different things could be seen at different times. For example, there were flowers that only bloomed once a year, and plants that only bore fruit once a year. The earlier they went out, the more they could see. Otherwise, they would have to wait for another year to see the same thing again. Lang Jie and Gu had said that many plants in the forest were dangerous, and they needed to know how to identify them. However, they could only know when they saw them. Otherwise, they would not have the concept based on other people's descriptions. Besides, since Mai allowed Xiao Xian to come with them next time, he obviously recognized Xiao Xian's ability. As for the rest, Xiao Xian only needed to go back and prepare. At this time, someone came in to look for Mai. It was Tua, who they had met before. Knowing that they had something to discuss, Xiao Xian did not want to disturb them, so he left. Uncle Mai, you go ahead. I will go back and prepare. Thank you, Uncle Mai. After Xiao Xian left, Mai moved his stiff palms. He shook his shoulders and swung his arms slightly, which made a series of cracking sounds. Because of Xiao Xian's punch, several bones in his arms were dislocated. However, this shake pushed all the dislocated bones back to their original positions. Although his palms looked fine, Mai knew that there were injuries on his palms. He had underestimated that kid. Mai had planned to comfort and enlighten Xiao Xian so that he could focus on his training. He also planned to give some examples of hunting to Xiao Xian, so that he could take him out to hunt next time. However, after feeling Xiao Xian's punch, Mai changed his mind. What did the kid say he was going to prepare? Tua asked. About the next hunting trip, Mai answered. Tua was a little dissatisfied. Didn't he say that sharpening the axe will not delay the work of cutting firewood? I thought he was waiting for the next hunt. Did he come to beg you just now? For the sake of the shaman, Tuo's attitude towards Xiao Xian was not bad. However, he did not want to give in when it came to hunting. The hunting that had just ended was an example. Fei's several serious mistakes during the hunting operation almost implicated the others. Mai shook his head. He didn't mention it. I allowed it. Why? Tuo was puzzled. The smile on Mai's face grew wider and wider. Since the blade is almost polished, it's a waste of time to keep sharpening it. Whether it can be sharpened or not, it's impossible to keep cooped up in the tribe. We can only go out and train in the forest. After leaving Mai's residence, Xiao Xian walked briskly down the mountain. Every step he took was huge, but his movement was very small. It looked like he was just floating over the stones. After going down the mountain, Xiao Xian did not immediately go back to his cabin. Caesar went to help the children in the cave to dig out stone worms, so Xiao Xian was not worried. When he came to Old Ku's cabin and was about to shout, he saw the straw curtain at the door being lifted up. An old man with a head full of silver hair strode out. Looking at the old man's face, it was obvious that he was angry. His beard was almost sticking up. Seeing Xiao Xian standing at the door, the old man frowned and looked at Xiao Xian from head to toe. It seemed that he was questioning something. His eyes were like a stone knife that could not wait to cut Xiao Xian a few times. His beard trembled. It seemed that he wanted to say something, but in the end, he only left with a heavy humph. Then he turned around and left. Xiao Xian was confused. Was he a psychopath? Seeing Gu poking his head out at the door, Xiao Xian asked, "Who was that?" After making sure that the old man was far away, Gu laughed and said, "That was Lang Ga's grandfather." That was Lang Ga's grandfather. Just as Lang Jie said, he was a bad-tempered old man. Walking into the cabin, Xiao Xian told old Gu that might allow him to go hunting next time. Gu was surprised with his jaw wide open. Old Gu, on the other hand, seemed to have expected this. He replied with a calm face, and let Xiao Xian go into the inner room to polish the hunting stone tools. The stone tools used for hunting were more demanding and time-consuming than the stone tools used for training. Xiao Xian had a lot of stone tools for training, but only a few for hunting. Half of them were given to old Gu to trade, and the other specially made ones were given to Lang Jie and Mai. Xiao Xian only had 5 fingers left. Xiao Xian did not say much. He took off his animal skin coat and went into the inner room. Gu looked at the straw curtain hanging there as a partition and smiled. Old Gu wanted to hide the girl and teach her by himself. Old Gu did not allow outsiders to enter the house, but there were always some people like Gu who would enter through the window. Of course, there were also some people that old Gu could not stop, such as Lang Ga's grandfather. Old Gu wanted to prevent others from snatching Xiao Xian away. "Hey, old Gu, why do you think they allowed Xian to follow the team in advance?" Gu asked. Old Gu did not say anything. "Tch, if you don't want to answer, then don't answer." Gu walked inside and carefully lifted the straw curtain to look inside. He wanted to see what was different about Xiao Xian compared to before. He could even make Mai, who had always been strict, let him go. After looking for a while, Gu walked back with his chin in his hand. He was shocked as if he saw a carnivore suddenly become a vegetarian. He. Before Gu could say what he had just seen, he saw old Gu holding a white knife and sharpening it. The word "he" was stuck in his mouth. After a while, he stuttered and pointed at the knife that was being sharpened, and then at old Gu. There were many marks on the body of this saber, and there were also many small gaps on the blade, which looked like saw teeth. This was caused by its previous use. The hilt that was installed in the early years was also broken, so it was simply removed. The part of the hilt that was exposed was a part that was integrated with the saber body. The original hilt that was installed on this part of the saber. Ji's eyes were glued to the knife, and he could not return to his senses for a long time. He had already guessed what old Gu wanted to do. It was also because of this that he was surprised. This was even more shocking than seeing Xiao Xian's totem pattern. When Xiao Xian finished sharpening the stone core and walked out, old Gu was installing the handle on the knife that had already been sharpened. The handle was installed with a kind of resin, which was mixed and melted. Xiao Xian had used this method before. It felt good, much better than wood or rope. "Wait for a moment. You can take it back when the handle is done," old Gu said to Xiao Xian, who was about to leave. Xiao Xian looked at the knife. The knife was wide, and the blade was about 1/2 meter long. The back of the knife was about a finger thick. It was much thicker than many of the stone knives that Xiao Xian had made. Looking at Ji's expression, Xiao Xian knew that this knife was extraordinary. He had never touched the knife, so he could not say anything. However, as he looked at it, he felt a heavy chill coming from the knife, as if it wanted to press people into the ground. "What is this?" Xiao Xian was puzzled. This is a knife made from the teeth of a ground shell. Gu looked at the knife, his face full of reluctance. He wanted to snatch it and hold it in his arms. This knife had not appeared in front of anyone since old Ku's leg was broken. He had begged old Ku countless times before, but old Ku never agreed. He was not even willing to take it out to sea. But now, old Ku was going to give this knife, which symbolized his best days, to Xiao Xian. Gu was envious, but he also knew that in his current situation, he could only be envious. There was no need to think about anything else. Ground shell. It was a ground shell. Even though Xiao Xian had not seen it with his own eyes, he had heard from Lang Jie that it was a giant ferocious beast that lived underground. When hunting, if you met a ground shell, don't even think about throwing stone spears at it. The only thing you could do was to run away. No one wanted to fight a ground shell, because they could not win. He had heard so many hunting stories from Lang Jie, but he had never heard of a hunting team fighting against a ground shell. When old Ku handed the knife to Xiao Xian and pushed him out of the door, Gu was still craning his neck to look around. His eyes were glued to the knife. Xiao Xian stood outside the house for a long time with the knife in his arms. It was not obvious, but it weighed at least 200 pounds. Chapter 39. Xiao Xian placed the saber that old Ku had given him on the newly made stone table in the house. Caesar stared at the saber on the table from 2 meters away and bared its teeth. Ever since it had sniffed the saber at a close distance, it had become very cautious. Its eyes were full of vigilance, and it kept a certain distance from the saber. Xiao Xian reached out and touched the saber, which was not as cold as the stone. After dozens of years, the strong murderous aura on the saber had settled down. After many rounds of polishing, the saber had become a little smaller due to wear and tear. The blade, which was originally full of small nicks, had become smooth and sharp after being polished again. Sighing softly, Xiao Xian carefully put on the saber with a leather sheath. Old Ku had given him his precious saber, and he wasn't afraid that he would lose it. Putting the saber aside, Xiao Xian took a slate. The slate was made of low-grade stone, and Xiao Xian had specially brought it back to use as a writing board. He listed out the number of stone tools he planned to make and wrote them down on the slate. In addition to spearheads and stone arrowheads, Xiao Xian also planned to make a few stone balls to bring along. When the time came, he could use the stone ropes or beast-tripping ropes. For 3 consecutive days, Xiao Xian spent time at old Ku's place, polishing stone tools and listening to old Ku talk about hunting. Old Ku didn't talk about his glorious past, and Xiao Xian didn't ask. When old Ku wanted to talk about it, he would. After finishing polishing the stone tools, old Ku asked Xiao Xian, "Do you know why people who live on the mountainside rarely go fishing?" Xiao Xian had always wondered about this question. Since everyone knew that there were fish in the river, why were there still so many people willing to risk their lives to hunt? Logically speaking, fishing was so easy. As long as one mastered the technique, it wouldn't take much effort. Moreover, as far as Xiao Xian knew, not everyone who lived on the mountainside had enough food. But in fact, Xiao Xian had only seen a few elderly people with limited mobility going down the mountain to join in the fishing. He didn't see any children on the mountain participating in the fishing. As for the soldiers, there was no need to mention them. Other than those who were responsible for guarding the river bank, he basically didn't see anyone snatching fish from the people of the mountain foot district. Old Ku raised his head and looked out the window. They could see the mountains in the distance from that direction. Because of the ancestral teachings. Old Ku said, 900 years ago, the chief and the shaman left a warning at the same time. As long as you are a healthy warrior, you must go out and participate in hunting. Even when there is enough food, you must not indulge in comfort or slack off. I must do everything possible to improve myself. It wasn't easy for a totemic warrior to improve. When they went out to hunt, they had to go through many life-and-death struggles before they could be promoted from a beginner totemic warrior to an intermediate totemic warrior. It was even more difficult to improve further. People like Mai and the others were almost mentally prepared to stay in the wilderness every time they went out to hunt. On the whole mountain, the people who lived in the mountain foot district were the weakest in terms of overall strength. At the same time, it also showed that these people's mentality was relatively lazy. But even so, Xiao Xian didn't see any reluctance on anyone's face every time they went out to hunt. Everyone was very active, even if they could now catch enough fish. Many warriors on the mountain didn't let their children go down the mountain to fish, probably because they didn't want their children to form the idea that getting food is actually very easy. From the brainwashing teachings passed down from generation to generation, they only needed to know that if they wanted food, they had to go into dangerous places and fight with the ferocious beasts in the mountains. Only with pressure would there be motivation to improve. A warrior who hasn't been tested by hunting is not a real warrior. Old Cook concluded. It sounded cruel, but it was understandable. Thousands of years of persistence couldn't be changed by a fishing incident. They believed that it was easy to slack off when fishing, so they would continue to persevere. Not to mention, the chief and the shaman had already made a development plan a long time ago. There was nothing to do with fish, and the focus was on the distant mountains. Xiao Xian remembered the murals on the wall of the stone room in the cave, and the last sentence, "One day, we will return to the old land. The glory is still there, and the fire of Yanjiao will never be extinguished." After leaving Ku's place and returning to his cabin, Xiao Xian gently counted the stone tools he made today, and classified them together with the stone tools he made a few days ago. The stone arrowheads made by Xiao Xian himself were different from those made by Lang Ga. The arrowheads were more streamlined, the wings were striped, and the tips were slightly straighter. In addition, he also made some three-winged stone arrowheads. Different from the stone tools used for training, the stone tools prepared for hunting were engraved with Xiao Xian's name. This was something that every hunting warrior in the tribe would do. After sorting out the stone tools, Xiao Xian turned back and saw Caesar squatting next to him, yawning. His ears drooped listlessly, and he looked like a lazy dog lying in front of his house. No wonder Lang Jie and the others didn't look at Caesar as prey, but directly ignored him. Caesar wasn't a challenge at all, and they weren't interested in him. However, when the hunting team went out for about 20 days, what would Caesar do? It was impossible for him to stay at home, and Xiao Xian didn't feel at ease if no one looked after him. Should he send him to the mountain and ask the shaman for help? No, the old faker couldn't take care of anyone when he was busy. Xiao Xian even thought about sending Caesar to the cave, but in the end, he gave up the idea. If he was sent to the cave, Caesar would do whatever he wanted, and those kids wouldn't be able to control him at all. After thinking of several candidates, Xiao Xian decided to let Old Cook keep an eye on him. Besides, Caesar would be more obedient in Old Cook's place. Caesar had been making stone tools in Old Cook's place for a long time, so he was familiar with the place. Besides, Xiao Xian also believed that Old Cook could take good care of Caesar. Therefore, on the third day after the hunting team came back, those who stayed behind were ready to set off. Xiao Xian took Old Cook's knife and the stone tools he made, and took a detour to Old Cook's house. He left Caesar at Old Cook's place, and left a lot of fish and meat. Caesar had grown bigger, and his appetite was not small. "Stay here and guard the door. I'll pick you up when I come back." When he was walking up the mountain with the equipment on his back, Xiao Xian could still hear Caesar's moans, which sounded quite pitiful. He was becoming more and more like a dog. According to the previous agreement with Lang Jie, Xiao Xian would go to Lang Jie first when he reached the mountainside, and then Lang Jie would take him up the mountain. Before the hunting team set off, there was a mobilization meeting. Xiao Xian did not know many of the procedures, so he had to be guided by someone, or else it would be easy to make mistakes. When Xiao Xian arrived, Lang Jie was already waiting at the door, with several big animal skin bags and net bags full of tools. "Let's go." Lang Jie walked in front with the equipment on his back. When he followed Lang Jie up the mountain, many people saw Xiao Xian and were surprised. They did not expect that Xiao Xian would be able to go hunting with them this time. "Is Fei not going?" Xiao Xian asked Lang Ga. Xiao Xian saw Fei's figure just now, but he did not bring any equipment, nor did he want to go up the mountain. He looked at Xiao Xian angrily. "Him." Lang Jie lowered his voice. During the last hunting trip, he was disobedient and made a mess. This time, Mai and the others did not let Fei go with them. They told him to stay at home and reflect. "We'll talk about it next time. Anyway, don't think about it this time. So Xian, when you go hunting with the hunting team, you must listen to them." "Got it." Xiao Xian replied. On the way, they met Ong and a few others who had a good relationship with Lang Jie, so they went up the mountain together. The mobilization meeting was held at the same place as last time, but this time the whole fire pit was not lit. The shaman was wearing a gray cloak, standing by the fire pit with a walking stick in his hand. He was talking with Chief Ao. When Xiao Xian looked over there, the shaman also looked over. When he saw Xiao Xian, he was stunned. Obviously, he remembered Xiao Xian this time, and did not expect that Xiao Xian would join this hunting mission. Chapter 40. Although confused, the shaman did not ask, but continued with his work. It was not like the scene of 1,000 people worshipping the marquis. Every time there were only about 200 people in the hunting team. The wounded from the previous hunting team would stay in the tribe to recuperate, and those who had to take care of others, were not in good condition, or had other things to do would not be included in the hunting team. Therefore, even if they were all in the same hunting team, the number of people in each hunting team was not always the same. After Lang Jie and the others entered the hunting ground, they consciously stood in their usual positions, and Xiao Xian stood beside them. At the front of the team were several important figures in the hunting team, more than 10 of them, including Mai. The shaman stood beside the fire pit, with a stone bowl in his hand. In the stone bowl, there were some dark green pigments extracted from plants. One by one, the warriors walked over and asked the shaman to draw patterns on their faces. The patterns were similar to the shape of the totem. The shaman was murmuring something while drawing, but Xiao Xian could not hear it clearly. Or perhaps, even if he heard it, he would not understand what it meant. Not everyone in the hunting team could have their faces painted by the shaman. Only the important figures in the hunting team were qualified to have their faces painted by the shaman. At this moment, they looked very serious, as if they were performing some kind of sacred ceremony. Looking at Lang Jie and the others, their eyes were full of envy. They were probably thinking that one day they could stand in front of the team and receive the shaman's blessing before the hunting team set off. Although he had other thoughts, Xiao Xian's face was still as serious as the others, with a little bit of envy. When the 10 or so warriors finished painting and returned to the hunting ground, the solemn atmosphere suddenly relaxed. Under the lead of the chief, they began to sing the hunting song. Unfortunately, Xiao Xian did not know how to sing at all. Xiao Xian had heard the hunting song several times, but he could not master it. He also did not know that the hunting team had to sing it together before the hunting team set off. Damn, it was like not knowing how to sing the national anthem at the flag-raising ceremony. It would be so embarrassing if he said it out loud. But the problem was that in the tribe, the song of hunting was usually taught by parents and elders. Xiao Xian came from the cave, and Xinz was not an original, so he had never paid attention to this. Lang Jie and the others also did not think about this aspect, so they all neglected it. However, Xiao Xian was not a real child after all. He did not know how to play the song of hunting, but he knew how to make up the numbers. Xiao Xian's expression didn't change. He stood there calmly, his mouth opening and closing, but he didn't make a sound. If one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't be able to tell that he was different from the crowd. Since the beginning of the world, our ancestors have been here. When the tribe rose, hunting was the priority. As the spring warmed up, the ice and snow melted. Birds and beasts jumped happily. Birds chirped and beasts roared. Hunters went far away. At first, Xiao Xian thought that the song of hunting would be over after a few lines, but as he waited, he realized that the song was really fucking long. It was like a story, from hunting in spring, to summer, to autumn, and finally ending in winter. Not only was it long, but it also had a fucking tragic ending. It was as if they were going to die. He wondered which master in the tribe wrote this song. Although the song talked a lot about hunting, and warned everyone that hunting in winter was dangerous and they had to be cautious when going out, Xiao Xian didn't feel that it was inspiring. However, the people present were all red in the face and neck, as if they were on steroids. They even sang the totem patterns on their bodies. They couldn't wait to tear apart ferocious beasts on the spot to vent their excitement. Xiao Xian really couldn't understand the mentality of these people. Perhaps, this was the difference between outsiders and natives. When Xiao Xian was singing with his mouth open, the shaman glanced at him several times. Xiao Xian knew, but he still didn't look away. He followed the example of Lang Jie and the others. When others were excited, he was also excited. When others roared with their spears, he also roared with his spear. Didn't Lang Jie say that no matter what he did, Xiao Xian would not make any mistakes? Standing by the fire pit, the shaman's old face twitched as he watched. Of course, he could see that Xiao Xian didn't know how to sing the song of hunting, but he didn't expect that Xiao Xian could be so thick-skinned. If it were other kids, they would have been terrified. After singing the song of hunting, Xiao Xian felt that the food he ate in the morning was almost used up. Since the morale had been boosted, the chief didn't say anything more. He asked the team leader to lead the team and set off immediately. There was a time plan for going out hunting, or there would be more trouble if they missed the timing. Xiao Xian moved his feet and followed Lang Ga, feeling someone was looking at him. Xiao Xian looked over. It was Mao. Mao was surprised. He did not expect that after Fei's accident in the last hunting mission, they would still allow the newly awakened warriors to join the team in advance. In fact, even the few kids who performed well in the last hunting mission might not be allowed to join the team this time. Obviously, Mao didn't consider himself as one of the newly awakened warriors. Xiao Xian glanced at him and ignored him. In case he made any mistakes, he had to follow Lang Jie closely. How could he have time to stare at that little kid? The hunting team walked down from the top of the mountain. People gathered on both sides of the path of glory to see them off. In this team, only Mao and Xiao Xian were among the newly awakened warriors this year. Therefore, the two of them were very conspicuous. Many people on the mountain were not familiar with Xiao Xian. When they saw the kid walking in the team, they realized that the kid in front of them was the one who was awakened in advance during the ritual ceremony. Once again, Xiao Xian made his presence known. Even those who didn't remember him last time remembered him. If he could follow the team, he must have the ability to do so. The tribe appreciated people with ability very much. As they walked down the mountain, they met more and more familiar faces. They waved their fists at Xiao Xian, not because they wanted to beat him, but because they wanted to encourage Xiao Xian. To Xiao Xian's surprise, the kids in the orphan cave also gathered by the path of glory and joined the team to see them off. They waved their little fists at Xiao Xian with envy in their eyes. At least they had a conscience. He didn't help them for nothing. Xiao Xian thought. Xiao Xian also saw Sai behind the crowd. Sai was carried here by his father. He planned to sleep a little longer in the early morning, but he was carried here to see the hunting team off. He was looking at the passing warriors carelessly, but suddenly he stopped yawning and stared at Xiao Xian in the team with his eyes wide open. Then he turned his head stiffly to look at his father. As expected, when Sai's father saw Xiao Xian in the team, he narrowed his eyes and tightened his grip on Sai's hand. He was thinking about how to give Sai more training tasks. Walking down the path of glory, the hunting team sped up. The voices of the crowd gradually faded away until they could no longer be heard. Xiao Xian carried his equipment and followed closely behind Lang Ga. They were not completely out of the patrol area of the tribe. There was a small piece of flat land in front of them. Once they got out of the flat land, they would be out of the territory of the tribe. Running on the thick grass, Xiao Xian looked up at the forest on the other side of the flat land. Clouds and mist rose up like steam, hanging in the air and covering a large part of the forest below. It looked oppressive and heavy. A sharp mountain peak showed a corner above the clouds and mist, like a black eye, overlooking the living beings below. Before entering the forest, they had already felt the heaviness as if it was going to bury them alive. Before entering the forest, there was a short rest time, and the leaders would assign tasks. Xiao Xian took the opportunity to ask Lang Jie, who was arranging the ground bow, "What should I do later?" "You don't have to think about other things," Lang Jie smiled and said, "just don't fall behind." Xiao Xuanzi's hunting trip began. "It's a new week, please recommend me." Chapter 41. After a short rest, the team leader led 40 warriors into the forest, while the others waited here. The rest of the warriors were divided into 5 groups. According to the original plan, they would enter the hunting areas separately in a fan shape, instead of gathering together. Xiao Xian was listening to Lang Ga's words, and when he looked up, he saw Mai and Mao coming over. "That kid didn't follow us last time. Why is he here this time? Does he want to change the route?" Ang whispered to his companions. "I just saw Mao go to find the team leader, and then Mai was called over," said Kuei, who had a good relationship with Lang Jie, and Ang Kuei was only a few years older than Xiao Xian, but after the awakening, he became taller. Now he looked not much shorter than Lang Jie and the others. Lang Jie and Ang both curled their lips. Xiao Xian knew it in his heart, because he heard Lang Jie and the others talk in private. The team leader of the hunting group was Mao's father. There were 2 reasons why Mao was able to join the hunting team. First, he was indeed capable, and he was indeed stronger than most of the other kids who were awakened in the same batch. His performance in the last hunting mission was also very good. The other reason was that he was ordered to join the hunting team by the team leader. Considering these 2 reasons, no one in the team had any objection. Obviously, it was Mao's idea to join their group this time, and the team leader had agreed. "Xian, Mao, and you awakened in the same batch, and you two are about the same age. But Mao has more hunting experience than you, so you two should communicate more," Mai said. "Okay." Xiao Xian didn't show any displeasure, because he was not qualified to raise any objection. Out of Xiao Xian's expectation, Mao did not show his usual arrogance of, "I am the best in the world," nor did he look at Xiao Xian provocatively. Instead, he behaved himself and listened to Mai's plan carefully. From this point of view, he was smarter than Fei. After a while, the sound of a wooden whistle came from the forest in the distance. The whistle sounded like the chirping of a bird, but it also sounded like the cry of a deer. In this forest, it was not considered abrupt. That was the signal sent by the advance group, which meant that there were no ferocious beasts in front of them that were beyond the abilities of the hunting team, and there was nothing unusual compared to the previous hunting teams. The following teams could continue. The advance team would send out the news after the initial investigation, but they would not wait for the following teams to hunt together. They were considered people from the first level, so their hunting area was naturally different from the teams led by Mai and the others. Tuo and Kiki, whom Xiao Xian knew, were both in the advance group. "Alright, let's go." Mai called out to the rest of the team, "Same old rules, we have to get to the other side of the mountain before sunset." Xiao Xian looked at the mountain that the mic was pointing at. The mountain was huge and tall. This would have been impossible in his previous life, but in this world, it seemed to have become a habit. The other hunting teams also had their own hunting routes. Some of them did not go over the mountain, but took a detour and went in other directions. Stepping into the dense forest, the team of about 30 people, each carrying a lot of things, walked through the forest, but did not make much noise. Above them, numerous ancient trees were clustered together, and their branches and wide leaves almost covered the entire sky. Below the trees, there were many unknown shrubs, and in the places where the shrubs did not gather, there were some ancient trees with their well-developed roots protruding from the ground. Figures jumped from the ground to the tree trunks, and nimbly jumped on the branches. The 30 people jumped one by one, but the branches only shook slightly. The rustling of the leaves did not attract the attention of other creatures in the forest. Xiao Xian followed the people in front of him, jumping from the ground to the branches, and then from the branches to the huge vines. The huge vines, which were several meters thick, were wrapped around the ancient trees. Many places on the vines were covered with moss. The moist air made the moss slippery, and one could easily fall down if they stepped on it. However, as long as they were steady, it was also a good slide. Stepping on the vines, they slid quickly. Their noses were filled with the fresh smell of plants, mixed with the fragrance of flowers. In addition, as the temperature rose, water vapor rose with the smell of all kinds of creatures living in the forest. This was the smell of the primitive forest. It was full of vitality, and also smelled danger and excitement. It made people feel as if all the hair on their bodies were trembling with nervousness. A flat-shaped insect the size of a millstone was lying on a vine in front of him. There were 3 rows of patterns on its body that looked like eyes. As the insect wriggled, the 3 rows of patterns on its back flashed. It looked like the eyes of some kind of creature that was scanning its surroundings. The hunting team did not slow down because of the obstacle in front of them. Xiao Xian did not hear any strange sounds, and saw the insect being peeled off from the vines and thrown down. Whoosh! A big bird flew under the vines, so fast that it was almost impossible to see clearly. And the insect that was falling down was picked up by the bird that had just flown by. As they moved forward, the light flickered. The vines arched into a high arc, and then fell down into the dense forest. On a thick branch above, there was a big colorful snake, as thick as a bucket, coiled around it. However, in this forest, it was nothing. No one knew if the snake was full or not, but it looked a little lazy. When the hunting team slid past the vines under the branches, it raised its head and looked down, spitting out its forked tongue. Its emotionless eyes stared at the people passing by below. Xiao Xian felt the cold eyes of the snake above him, and followed Lang Jie closely. Since the people in front of him did not care about the snake above, he did not need to do anything. In terms of experience, Xiao Xian was just a rookie. He knew when to take action, and when to hold back. He just needed to learn from Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian was now in the middle of the team, and there were other warriors behind him. The warriors in the back thought that since it was Xiao Xian's first time following the team, they would help him if he could not keep up, or if he slipped or missed a step. But unexpectedly, Xiao Xian could keep up with the team, and did not make any mistakes. On the way, Xiao Xian saw a lot of prey, such as huge bears and unknown creatures, and small beasts running between the bushes. But the hunting team did not slow down to take a look at those beasts, and just walked towards the mountain that Mai had pointed out. The closer they got to the mountain, the more the plants changed. The towering ancient trees became sparser, and the hunting team stopped walking on the trees. Seeing that Lang Jie and the others in front of them slowed down, Xiao Xian slowed down as well. Mai made a gesture to the warriors behind him, and 7 or 8 warriors in the team spread out to check if there were any dangerous ferocious beasts nearby. After making sure it was safe for the time being, Mai asked the hunting team to take a rest. The team changed their formation, and spread out a little. They did not just stand there, but prepared the tools in their hands. Tired. I guess, Lang Jie was playing with the ground bow, and was about to ask Xiao Xian if he was tired. If he was tired, he could eat something and drink some water to replenish his strength. There was no need to be too much pressure. After all, they had to keep running from the edge of the forest to here, and they had to concentrate to avoid making any mistakes. They would be physically and mentally exhausted if they were nervous. For the newly awakened warriors, it was indeed too much for them. Even Mao, who was recognized as the best among the newly awakened warriors this year, was a little out of breath. But now, looking at Xiao Xian, Lang Jie could not finish his sentence. Xiao Xian seemed to be fine. Not only was he not out of breath, he even had the mind to pay attention to the tree fox on the tree next to him. Chapter 42. It was Xiao Xian's first time seeing a small animal called a tree civet. It was about the size of an adult's palm, and its gray fur was mixed with brown stripes. It had big black eyes on its furry round head, and its eyes were especially innocent when it looked at people. Its ears were slightly lowered as it crouched on a 10-meter-high branch, hugging the tree trunk and looking down at the people below. "Don't look at it, that little thing doesn't taste good," Lang Jie said to Xiao Xian in a low voice. They were resting here and didn't forbid them from talking, but they all kept their voices low. Generally speaking, the warriors in the tribe weren't picky about the taste of their food. They would eat anything that didn't taste good, as long as it could replenish their energy. However, if it was rated as not tasty, then it wasn't just a matter of tasting bad. There might be other adverse effects on the body. "Aren't they afraid of people?" Xiao Xian asked in a low voice. Actually, many wild beasts don't show fear when they see a human for the first time. Instead, they show curiosity. But if you show a little bit of killing intent, then it's different. While speaking, Lang Jie raised his bow and aimed at the tree civet on the tree. The tree civet, which looked especially innocent and harmless, suddenly had a murderous look in its eyes. Its mouth, which hadn't been open before, was now wide open. Xiao Xian could see the sharp teeth in its mouth. Lang Jie didn't shoot at the tree civet, but lowered his hand, no longer aiming at it. "It doesn't taste good with less meat, and its cry is also unpleasant," Lang Jie said and went back to loading his ground bow, checking if there was any damage. After Lang Jie left, the tree civet on the tree returned to its original appearance. A finger-long flying insect flew over and flapped its wings. The surface of its body was covered in a layer of fine scales that reflected the sunlight and flickered. One moment, it would appear in one place and the next moment, it would appear in another place. They flew extremely fast in the air and could change positions in an instant. Whoosh! The tree civet waved its arms, as if it had already predicted where the flying insect would fly next. It stretched out its claws and clawed at the insect. In the blink of an eye, the flying insect was trapped between the tree fox's claws. Xiao Xian watched as the tree civet twisted the flying insect and broke its wings. Then, like a deep-fried dough stick, it ate the flying insect in one bite. As it chewed, it stared at Xiao Xian who was under the tree. When only the tail was left, the tree fox stopped gnawing. It looked at the remains on its claws and then looked at Xiao Xian who was under the tree. Then, it threw the tail towards Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian sensed the insect carcass being thrown at him at high speed. He moved half a step and dodged it just in time. What the hell? The tree civet on the tree began to bark. Xiao Xian thought that the tree civet was dissatisfied because he avoided it, but he caught a glimpse of Ong moving not far away. He then looked at the tree civet on the tree and saw that it had already run away, as if it was avoiding something. Ong ran in the opposite direction of the tree civet, and climbed up a tree nimbly. On his back, he carried 5 short spears, which were half the length of the ones he usually used. They could be used as javelins. The rest of the hunting group quieted down and slowed down their breathing. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, it would have been hard to imagine that there were so many people here. On seemed to have seen something. He quickly and quietly pulled out a short spear and was about to throw it. But before he threw it out, he stopped and made a gesture to My thought for a while, and waved his hand to ask Ong to come back. Ong looked regretful, and went back to the hunting group after climbing down the tree. At the same time, the hunting group hid behind the protruding stones and trees. Xiao Xian followed suit. After 2 breaths, Xiao Xian saw something that looked like a fox jumping out of the bushes. It looked around, and then ran away in one direction. Lang Jie signaled Xiao Xian to continue to wait. After a while, Xiao Xian heard a rustling sound. It was the sound of a creature moving and rubbing against the branches. A creature about 7 meters tall slowly appeared. It had brown fur, 4 thick limbs, and a thick and powerful tail behind it. It looked a little fierce, but looking at its slow and heavy body, it looked a little lazy. It sniffed with its nose, and walked to a few trees. It stood on its hind legs, with its strong tail behind its back, forming a tripod with its feet. After standing up, it exposed its front claws, which were like sickles, and hooked the trees in front of it. It easily cut off branches and leaves from the trees, as if it was cutting wheat. It was an animal that ate leaves as its main food. But judging from Mai's behavior, Xiao Xian also knew that this big guy was not easy to deal with. Thinking back to the hunting stories he had heard before, this big guy in front of him should be a giant-clawed beast. In Xiao Xian's eyes, this giant-clawed beast was already very big, but in fact, this one was not yet an adult. An adult giant-clawed beast was even bigger. Moreover, giant-clawed beasts only looked heavy and lazy, but when they were threatened, they reacted quickly. Their huge claws could easily uproot trees. In fact, giant-clawed beasts were also on the hunting list of the hunting team, but Mai did not send anyone to hunt them now. The trees were not big, and the giant-clawed beast quickly ate up most of the leaves on the trees. It lost interest in the rest of the leaves and continued to lazily walk on the ground. It moved its heavy body and left. After it left, Mai and the others continued to climb up the mountain. On the way up the mountain, Lang Jie checked a few traps he had set before. There were a few poor guys who had fallen into the traps not long ago, and were still alive. They had been dragged out and killed by the warriors of the hunting group. The trap wasn't big, so it only caught small prey. Lang Jie taught Xiao Xian his experience while fixing the devices in the traps. Pointing at the warriors who were dealing with the prey, Lang Jie said to Xiao Xian, "After you catch the prey, you have to check whether they are sick or not. Like the one we caught just now, its eyes had changed color, and its body was bald. When the meat was cut open, the blood had a strange smell. Even if that prey is still alive, it won't live long. If we eat it, we will end up the same as it." The warriors who were in charge of dealing with the prey had neatly skinned it, cut out its internal organs, and packed them into pieces. They even smeared some grass juice on the bags, probably to cover the smell. Mai led the hunting team to climb up the mountain, so they did not hunt many large beasts. The environment at the top of the mountain was not as mild as below. The snowy peak was shining under Yang Guang's gaze, and they could clearly see the large basin on the other side of the mountain. Finally, before the sun set, the hunting team climbed over the mountain and arrived at a cave on the mountainside. This was the hunting team's stronghold, and they would spend the night here. With a cave to spend the night, it was naturally easier. After a tense journey, they could finally rest, and the warriors relaxed a little. There used to be a cave bear living in this cave. Later, our hunting team killed that cave bear, so we took over this place. Lang Jie told Xiao Xian about the origin of this cave. "Oh right, Lang Jie, what kind of trouble did Hoodlum get himself into during the last hunting mission?" Xiao Xian asked. The smile on Lang Ga's face suddenly disappeared, and he sighed. He leaned closer to Xiao Xian and complained in a low voice, "That little bastard could have gotten himself into any trouble, but why did he have to get himself into trouble with the thorn-black wind? The thorn-black wind did not refer to any kind of wild beast, but was a general term used by the people in the tribe for those predators who liked to lurk. That was why they usually called them XX black wind, and thorn-black wind was one of them. After the sun set, the temperature began to drop. The entrance of the cave was blocked by a huge rock, and the cold wind poured in through the gap. But there were many people in the cave, so it was still warm. If he looked outside the cave, Xiao Xian could see the 2 crescent moons gradually appearing in the night sky. Lang Jie and the others said that tomorrow's weather would be good. Outside the cave, in the quiet forest at night, on the seemingly calm basin, nocturnal beasts began to become active. In a small pond at the foot of the mountain, the calm surface of the water began to ripple, and a huge body quietly emerged from the water, crawling out of the pond. Outside the pond, several nocturnal beasts who were drinking water had already fled for their lives. The giant beast did not rush to catch up with those small prey, but stood by the pond, waiting for the water to drip off its body and dry it. Even the moonlight could not reflect any light on its body. At this time, the giant beast began to move, and its huge body quickly blended into the night. Chapter 43. At dawn, after a night's rest, the people in the cave had recovered their energy and were counting the equipment they were going to bring out later. They brought a lot of stone tools from the tribe. There were some spare stone tools in the cave, but they couldn't be fully equipped when hunting, so they only needed to bring some. Xiao Xian brought a long spear and 3 short spears on his back. He also brought the stone knife that old cook gave him. Compared to the others, Xiao Xian didn't bring much. It was his first time participating in a hunt, so the first thing he needed to do was to adapt and observe. After eating something, Mai pushed away the boulder that blocked the entrance of the cave. The sun hadn't completely risen yet, and the wind outside blew into the cave with cool moisture, refreshing everyone. The place where the cave was located was relatively remote. Not far ahead was a steep slope. If they rolled down from here, they would probably roll directly to the foot of the mountain. There weren't any trees around, nor were there any animals. Walking out of the cave, Xiao Xian could see the mountain peaks surrounded by clouds in the distance, as well as the basin at the foot of the mountain. Ignoring the threatening ferocious beasts hiding in the basin, this forest was still very beautiful. Before hunting, you need to understand the prey's living patterns. Small prey like rabbits usually don't come out during the day. Most of them come out at night to look for food. Lang Jie said to Xiao Xian as they went down the mountain. He pointed out to Xiao Xian several gnawing marks on the grass and leaves, which were left by the rabbits and other animals that were active at night. Wild goats usually don't live near this mountain. They are only found in the mountains over there, but sometimes you can see them here. In winter, they usually come out during the day to look for food. In summer, they come out more in the morning and at night, and hide in the valley to rest during the day. I'll show you when we cross the basin in a few days. There are also some small prey that like to move around the edge of the forest. During the day, they usually hide in the bushes and under the trees on the mountainside. They only come out to look for food in the morning and at dusk. Xiao Xian listened carefully to Lang Ga's words and memorized them in his mind. This was the knowledge that he had to know to survive in this place. Only by understanding the living habits of the prey could they be targeted and increase their efficiency. In addition, when looking for prey, you can first carefully check the traces, such as fresh scratches on the trees, clear footprints on the ground, and so on, which means that prey has been here recently. Generally speaking, as long as you don't wantonly destroy the surrounding forest environment, the beasts may still follow the same old path. Once they feel that the prey has seen you, you can hold your breath and not move. Just like the previous tree civet, it is likely that it is also the first time they have seen a human, and their curiosity will be greater than their fear. By the way, for warriors like you who have just awakened, you don't have enough power yet. Try to avoid those large beasts, especially ferocious beasts. Otherwise, you will become their prey. As he spoke, Lang Jie paused. He carefully looked at the marks on the ground and then at the grass beside him. A wild boar came here. Lang Jie went over to Mai and discussed with him, there's a small wild boar nearby. Since we haven't entered the central hunting area yet, I'll bring Xian and the rest over there for some exercise. Okay. After Mai finished talking with Lang Jie, he said something to Qiao who was next to him. Qiao and Mai were husband and wife. When Xiao Xian heard Qiao's name for the first time, he joked with Lang Jie that they were destined to be husband and wife. Unfortunately, Lang Jie didn't understand Xiao Xian's words at all. In this team, there were only 7 female warriors, and Qiao was the most powerful one among them. Qiao Mai and his wife were both intermediate totem warriors. In the past, when they went hunting, they would each take 10 people to hunt separately, and then they would meet up again after the hunt. According to the action plan discussed with Mai Zhao, Qiao left with a team to track the giant horned deer. Mai continued to lead the rest of the team along the original route. Lang Jie, you and I'll go to find that wild boar. I'll go over there with the others. Don't go too far. Got it. Lang Jie had set traps in many places on the mountain, including rope traps, falling stone traps, and sharp knife traps. Lang Jie pointed them out to Xiao Xian one by one, so that he wouldn't fall into them. Soon, Lang Jie found the wild boar's trace. He asked Xiao Xian and Mao to wait here, and he went to drive the wild boar over. Xiao Xian stood on a tree, carefully observing the surroundings. Although Mai and Lang Jie said that there were no large beasts around, he still had to be careful of some insects and snakes. The sound of the wild boar came from not far away, and it was approaching. Obviously, Lang Ga's driving worked, and the wild boar didn't run to other directions. Listening carefully, Xiao Xian held the long spear in his left hand, and took out a short spear from his back with his right hand. You can see how I do it later. For those prey, you can first trip them, and then kill them with the long spear. Mao, who was standing on another tree, said with a little arrogance. Without the others, this guy didn't pretend anymore, and acted like an experienced person. Xiao Xian glanced at him, and continued to listen to the sound that was getting closer and closer. Lang Jie and Mai both said that it was a small wild boar, but from the sound, Xiao Xian didn't feel that it was small at all. The wild boar that rushed out of the bush was at least 400 pounds. At first glance, it looked like a bear. But obviously, such a size could only get the word small from Lang Jie and the others. The wild boar rushed very fast. The wild boar seemed to realize that there was an ambush here, so it turned around. Xiao Xian quickly chased after it, and Mao, who was on another tree, ran in front of Xiao Xian. Whoosh! A short spear shot towards the wild boar like an arrow leaving the bow. Whoosh! The spearhead went straight into the ground, and the body of the spear passed by the wild boar. The wild boar's reaction was really fast, but after the first spear was shot, the second spear also arrived. Suddenly, there was an ear-piercing squeal in the forest. The second spear was stuck in its neck, and half of the spearhead went in. The wild boar screamed, and rushed to a big tree with the spear in its body. When it got close to the tree, it rubbed the spear off its neck with the help of the tree trunk. There was only a little blood on the tip of the spear that was rubbed off. Obviously, Mao's throw just now did not cause much damage to the wild boar. Mao was annoyed that he did not get the spear after throwing twice in a row. He was eager to show off just now, so he did not take the opportunity to throw the spear 3 times in a row. He held the third spear in his hand and continued to chase. He did not find any movement from Xiao Xian behind him, and thought, even if I missed, I will not miss next time. The guy behind me is not as good as me. For many people who were hunting for the first time, even if they had heard the hunting stories and had a solid foundation in theory, they would find that they did not have time to think when they really went into battle. Therefore, the people who were hunting for the first time were either too impatient to take the opportunity to shoot, or they felt that they could not find the best opportunity to shoot, so they kept waiting, and finally found that the opportunity had been missed. Therefore, in Mao's opinion, although he did not take the opportunity to shoot, at least he hit the target once. It was better than Xiao Xian, who did not shoot for a long time. After being stabbed, the wild boar did not slow down. Instead, it ran even faster than before, as if it was going all out. Just when Mao was about to shoot, he heard a quick whoosh sound behind him, and the next moment, the spearhead was inserted into the ground. Just now, the spear almost brushed against the front hoof of the wild boar, and the handle was slanted in front of the front hoof of the wild boar. Apparently, the wild boar did not expect to be stopped like this. It did not stop running forward, and was tripped by the spear. Before it could react, the second spear came, and it happened to be in front of the raised front hoof of the wild boar. The wooden handle of the spear was broken by the wild boar's strong momentum, and the wild boar was also tripped by the two spears. It rolled on the ground, and when it was about to get up, a figure jumped up from a nearby tree, and rushed over. The spear was like a shooting star, falling straight from the sky, and pierced into the wild boar's neck, which was the spot where the skin was hurt just now. An ear-piercing screech was heard, louder than before, and it hurt people's ears. Xiao Xian did not pull the spear out immediately. Instead, he gripped the spear and exerted more force. Puff! The spearhead almost pierced through the wild boar's neck, and the wild boar's howling stopped abruptly. Only its four hooves were still struggling, but it was too weak to fight back. Chapter 44. Lang Jie and the others soon appeared next to the wild boar. They had been watching from behind, thinking that it would take a while for the two kids to kill the wild boar. Unexpectedly, they did it so quickly. Not bad. Lang Jie said, looking at the wild boar that was still alive. To use a stone spear, one must be fast, accurate, and strong, or it would be difficult to use it effectively, not to mention the wild boar with thick skin. No matter how good the stone material was, it had to be used properly. However, judging from the situation just now, the two kids were good at using the spear. Lang Jie and the others nodded in their hearts. But Mao, standing next to them, was still in a daze. He did not expect that Xiao Xian, who had not made a move before, could be so fast. From the first spear to the wild boar's neck, it was only a blink of an eye. Was this really the first time he had hunted? Not only Mao, but Lang Jie and the others were also sighing in their hearts. No wonder Mao allowed Xiao Xian to follow them this time. This kid really had the talent. In fact, Xiao Xian was just following his intuition. It was his first time hunting, so he naturally did not have much experience. But when he was chasing the wild boar, there was a moment when his intuition told him that it was a good time to strike. So, he did not hesitate to use his totem power. Two short spears were shot out one after another, and then the last hit was fatal when the wild boar was tripped. If the wild boar was not tripped, it would be difficult for him to accurately pierce the wound. Xiao Xian looked at the broken handle in his hand, frowning slightly. Two short spears and a long spear were all broken. The first two were broken by the wild boar, while the long spear was broken because the handle could not bear the force when he stabbed it. It seemed that besides the stone material of the spearhead, he also had to pay attention to the wood. Don't worry, there is plenty of good wood in the forest. We can cut some back and make them in the cave. Lang Jie comforted him. Indeed, in the tribe, there was not much good wood in the surrounding mountains. Stones were okay, but wood was not so satisfactory. Therefore, every time the hunting team went out, they would bring more spearheads, and the wood for the handles would be found in the forest. For larger beasts, Lang Jie and the others would first bleed them and put the blood into a bottle made from plant fruits such as a gourd. The blood could be eaten, and the meat that had been bled was easier to store. At this time, Lang Jie did not forget to impart his experience to Xiao Xian. The life of a wild boar is actually very fixed. Most of the time, it will rest in the grass near the water. Its daily foraging route also rarely changes. It will only look for a new place when it runs out of food or when it is threatened. When the temperature in the mountains drops, they will move to the valley that faces the sun and avoids the wind. He planned to skin the wild boar and dig out its internal organs before its body temperature dropped. However, before he could do anything, he heard a few whistles. It was a signal from the microphone, indicating that Lang Jie and the others should hurry over. There was a big prey over there. Lang Jie and the others had no time to skin the wild boar. Their expressions changed, and they packed up their things and rushed to the place where the whistles came from. "Don't worry about that wild boar. Hurry up and follow us," Lang Jie said. Xiao Xian did not waste any time. He did not look at the prey on the ground again, and followed Lang Jie and the others. There were different levels of prey. Different prey contained different amounts of energy in the meat. Compared to the same size of meat, the higher level prey could fill your stomach and even make you feel bloated. However, the lower level prey would not only not fill your stomach, but would also feel hungry after a while of exercise. This was also the reason why many warriors preferred the higher level prey in the forest, especially the ferocious beasts, rather than the common wild beasts. There must be a reason why people in the tribe called them ferocious beasts. For example, the black wind that Lang Jie mentioned last night belonged to the category of ferocious beasts. However, the people in the tribe did not dare to provoke and kill the black wind, because it was too difficult. The thumping sound was getting closer and closer. It sounded like a large creature was stepping on the ground. The ground was shaking, and there was also the sound of breaking wood. Many small wild beasts around were running away, trying to avoid this dangerous place. "You two stay away." Lang Jie stopped Xiao Xian and Mao from getting closer, and the others quickly went over there. When he saw the creature, Xiao Xian took a deep breath. He finally knew why Mai and Lang Jie said that the wild boar was small. Compared to the giant creature in front of them, the wild boar was like a toy car, while the one in front of them was like a fierce armored vehicle. Four-fanged wild boar. It's a four-fanged wild boar. Mao, who was standing next to him, was both surprised and excited. After all, it was not easy to come across such prey when hunting outside. He did not expect to see one on his second hunting trip. How could he not be excited? Generally, male wild boars had a pair of exposed fangs, but the giant boar in front of them, which was more than 10 meters tall, had 4 pairs of fangs. In addition to the big fangs that came out of its mouth like other wild boars, there were 3 pairs on its face. The top pair was on the forehead, and was shorter than the other 3 pairs. The 4 pairs of fangs all rolled in the same direction, almost forming a shield that could easily break the trees in front of it. Xiao Xian even wondered if the boar's vision would be affected by its many fangs. According to the classification of wild boars in the tribe, a boar with 3 pairs of fangs was already a ferocious beast, not to mention this one with 4 pairs. The 4-fanged wild boar was so agitated and angry that the mane on its neck stood up like steel needles. When Xiao Xian saw the 4-fanged wild boar, there were already a few spears stuck in its body. These spears were obviously not pierced so deeply in one go. Instead, it was because the spears were pushed in again and again. There were also several broken spears. The spearheads or handles were broken during the process, leaving only a section or spearhead on top. Many figures were moving around the wild boar. Mai dodged a thick tree trunk that was lifted by the wild boar. His figure flashed, and the strength in his body reached the peak in an instant. With the help of a spear stuck in the wild boar's body, he jumped up, and his clenched fist was like a hammer. With a strong momentum, he punched the wild boar's body. The area hit by Mai's fist caved in, and the skin and flesh nearby vibrated like ripples. A loud and clear sound of a wild boar was heard, as if it was going to tear the space apart. The blast of air from the wild boar's mouth was like a hurricane, whistling to the surroundings. The nearby branches were all blown away by the blast of air, and countless leaves and broken branches were forcibly blown off from the trees, flying far away. Xiao Xian, who was standing not far away, naturally felt such a strong whistling skill. It was so fucking smelly. After being punched again and again, the four-fanged wild boar was really anxious. Some of the protruding stones along the way were smashed into pieces by its hard big hooves. All the obstacles in front of it were smashed, and the wild boar ran even faster, as if it was going to smash God and Buddha. "Don't let it go to the pool," Mai shouted. It was not easy for them to drive the wild boar into the forest, and they could not let it go out. Besides, there were some dangerous guys lurking around the pool, and they did not want to provoke them. Fortunately, those big guys did not like to come out during the day. 15 warriors, 5 of whom were intermediate totem warriors, could not stop the four-fanged wild boar. Fortunately, Xiao and the others, who were hunting the giant antler deer, heard the whistle and came over to join the hunting circle. Hammers, axes, stone ropes, and so on were used. Many spearheads were broken, and the handles were broken. Finally, the four-fanged wild boar was stopped before it ran out of the forest. Hearing the sound of the boar falling to the ground, Xiao Xian's rapid heartbeat also calmed down, and his nervous mood suddenly relaxed. After Lang Jie gave him a safe sign, he ran over. Xiao Xian threw away the piglet's blood, and replaced it with the four-fanged wild boar's blood, which was much more nutritious than the previous one. Lang Jie asked Xiao Xian to drink one mouthful at a time. If he drank too much, he would not be able to bear it, as a totem warrior who had just awakened. Since they had hunted such a good prey, they did not chase other prey for the time being. After a simple cleaning, they moved the boar to the cave on the mountainside. When they returned to the cave, it was almost noon. In order to hunt this big boar, everyone felt a little exhausted. All of their strength burst out in a short time, and once they relaxed, they were very tired. Fortunately, we did not let the four-fanged wild boar run to the pond, or it would have been troublesome if the thorn-black wind came out. Thinking of the situation last time, Lang Jie still had a lingering fear. The others also had the same feeling. Fortunately, they had caught the four-fanged wild boar in time. After roasting the four-fanged wild boar, the hunting group took a short rest after eating. Xiao Xian felt a warm current surging in his body after eating, which made him feel lazy and comfortable. This was the benefit of high-level prey. The strength consumed in the morning was quickly recovering, and at the same time, he gradually became sleepy. Take a nap. You have just awakened, so you need more time to digest meat with high energy content. Mai said. Xiao said that she had tracked the movement of the giant antler deer herd, and that they would go hunting in the afternoon. Because of the large number of the deer herd, Mai would also bring some people to help. Lang Jie and the other 4 stayed in the cave to guard, and also to take care of the 2 kids who were digesting the boar meat. When Xiao Xian woke up again, there were only 5 people in the cave, including Lang Ga. After drinking some water, Xiao Xian still felt a little sleepy. After asking Mai about their movements, he planned to sleep for a while more. At this time, Ong ran in from outside the cave, with a pale face. I just heard the cry of the thorn-black wind. It seems that Mai and the others got into trouble when they brought the prey back. Why would the thorn-black wind come out in the daytime? The sun is not down yet. Lang Jie and the others were so shocked that they jumped up. Although the sun had already set, it was not yet dusk, and the thorn-black wind usually came out at night, and most of the time it was late at night. Do you think it is revenge from last time? So it came out of the pond in advance to block Mai and the others? Ong said worriedly. Shall we go and help them? Someone suggested. Lang Jie opened his mouth, and glanced at Xiao Xian and Mao who were lying on the side. It's okay. You go ahead. It is safe in the cave. Xiao Xian said. It was not suitable for him to join them in his current state. If he went, he would be a burden. You go ahead. Mao also woke up. The thorn-black wind is not easy to deal with. Although Mao did not go with Mai and the others last time, he heard from others that it took almost all the strength of the whole team to get rid of the tough big guy. It was not easy. Okay. Xian, you two stay in the cave and don't go out. Lang Jie and the other four left the cave, and the boulder at the entrance was moved back to block the entrance. There was another vent in the cave, so they would not be suffocated. As long as Xiao Xian and the others did not come out, it was indeed safer to stay in the cave. Chapter 45. After Lang Jie and the others left, Mao paced back and forth in the cave anxiously. He still didn't know what to do. He scratched his head impatiently and looked around, trying to find something to distract himself. When he turned his head, he saw Xiao Xian sitting on the straw mat with his legs crossed and staring blankly. Hey! Mao shouted towards that direction, why aren't you worried? Mao didn't have a good impression of Xiao Xian, but now was not the time to care about personal grudges. What's more, there were only 2 kids in the cave. If he didn't find someone to talk to, he would be worried. He always felt that it would be better to find something to do and talk to someone. Xiao Xian raised his head and glanced at him, so what if I'm worried? If we go out like this, we'll become targets before we even get close. Do you think we'll drag them down? I didn't say I wanted to go out. Mao roared angrily. Although he did want to go out and take a look, he still felt uncomfortable when Xiao Xian said it so bluntly. If you can't go out, what else do you want? While speaking, Xiao Xian pointed at the big pieces of meat that Lang Jie and the others hadn't had time to roast, and said, instead of doing nothing here, why don't you roast them? No. Seeing Xiao Xian's attitude, Mao was furious. He felt that Xiao Xian was completely heartless. Why did Mai and the others treat Xiao Xian so well? Xiao Xian ignored Mao. In fact, he was not as calm as he looked. He always felt that something was going to happen, but there was nothing he could do now. He felt frustrated. Beside him was a small bow that Lang Jie had just finished making. It was tightly wrapped with vines, and the string was soaked in beast blood and some kind of grass juice. It was very tough, and did not have the smell of beast blood. Instead, it had the smell of the woods in the forest. If it was hidden in the bushes or trees, it would be very difficult to find. Although this kind of bough was not very lethal to the wild beasts in this forest, it played a very good role in driving the wild beasts away. Previously, Lang Jie had used this bough and set to drive the wild boars towards Xiao Xian and the others. It was a pity that such a bough was too small, and there were not enough materials to make a bough that could withstand the peak strength of a totem warrior. Ground bows, traps, and other things were not very effective against the large beasts in this forest. Most of the time, they still had to rely on manpower. Xiao Xian sighed almost imperceptibly. He wondered how Mai and the others were doing. Hopefully, there wouldn't be any casualties this time. Hunting was always filled with danger. One moment it was calm and tranquil, and the next moment it might be like standing on the edge of a cliff. The slightest carelessness could cause one to fall into the abyss without leaving behind a corpse. Compared to that, the tribe was really comfortable. No wonder old Ku said that they must go into the forest to have a look. If they stayed in the tribe, they would never feel such pressure. Here, they could only try their best to survive under the pressure of the cruel law of nature. If I don't eat you, you will eat me. In this place, there were more ferocious beasts than humans. It was extremely difficult to rely on one's own strength to get food and survive in this dangerous forest. Of course, the warriors in the tribe had their own special source of power, but no warrior was strong enough to go hunting alone in the deep forest. Only by working together and relying on the strength of the group could one survive. Just like the four-fanged wild boar that they had encountered before, and the thorn-black wind that Mai and the others were fighting hard against. There was still a long way to go from a rookie to a hunter. He stopped thinking about it, because it was useless to think too much. Xiao Xian cut off a small piece of meat from the large piece of bloody meat on the side, poked a small hole with a stone spear, and pierced the meat with a half-meter-long stick. Then, he took it to the fire and roasted it for a while. When a layer of burnt skin formed on the surface of the meat, Xiao Xian moved the stick to a position slightly further away from the fire to prevent the oil from flowing out. Xiao Xian continued to roast it. Mao, who was anxious and didn't know what to do, turned around twice and looked at Xiao Xian again. He asked in a bad tone, "What are you doing? Roasting it for yourself?" If it was roasted by the hunting team, they would not only roast such a small piece. But Xiao Xian only roasted such a small piece. Obviously, he roasted it for himself. Yes. Xiao Xian answered weakly. He was really hungry, and the energy he gained from eating the meat was gone again. Now that he couldn't do anything else, he might as well fill his stomach first. Only when he was full would he have the energy to do other things. Mao's face twitched. He was still a little full. The four-fanged boar meat he had eaten before was about the same size as Xiao Xian. Mai had calculated it before he cut it for them. Too much meat would cause indigestion. If he didn't move after eating, he wouldn't be hungry for the whole day. But now Xiao Xian was roasting meat again. "Eat until you die," Mao said angrily. Xiao Xian didn't care. He was really getting hungrier and hungrier. He didn't move much. When the meat was roasted, Mai and the others still hadn't come back. Xiao Xian felt the warm feeling after eating the meat again. He was sleepy. He wanted to wait for Mai and the others to come back, but his eyelids were getting heavier and his mind was a little muddled. He couldn't stay awake anymore. Xiao Xian said to Mao, who was walking back and forth to the entrance of the cave, "I'm going to sleep for a while. Wake me up if anything happens. Don't go out by yourself." Seeing that Xiao Xian still had the mood to sleep, Mao pointed at Xiao Xian angrily. His chest heaved up and down. He wanted to punch Xiao Xian, but he restrained himself. However, after Xiao Xian fell asleep, Mao walked back and forth. As he continued to digest the meat and store the energy, he also felt sleepy. He had no choice. He couldn't wait for Mai and the others to come back, and he couldn't go out of the cave. So he just lay down and fell asleep. The sky outside the cave was getting darker and darker. The sun was about to set, leaving only a little halo on the edge of the mountain in the distance. The halo was getting smaller and smaller. The noisy forest gradually quieted down. The day animals had already retreated to their resting places, and the nocturnal animals were also getting restless as the night deepened. At the same time, Mai and the others, who were stopped at the foot of the mountain, were also very depressed. The thorn-black wind was very territorial. Generally speaking, there would only be one thorn-black wind in one place. There was only one pool at the foot of the mountain, and the area around the pool would be considered as the territory of the thorn-black wind. Theoretically, there should only be one thorn-black wind here. Last time, they only met one adult thorn-black wind. But now, they were stopped by two adult thorn-black winds. After Lang Jie and the other four joined the team, the pressure on Mai and the others was slightly relieved. When they went down the mountain, Lang Jie and the others deliberately brought some herbs from the cave. Some of them were used for external injuries, and the other was used for the thorn-black wind. The herbs mixed by the shaman were not good for ferocious beasts. Now, the thorn-black wind attacked less often. The team of 30 people did not have the upper hand when facing two thorn-black winds, and the two thorn-black winds could not do anything to Mai and the others for the time being. Most of the time, they just watched not far away. But as long as someone ran up the mountain, the two thorn-black winds would quickly run to stop them. "Mai, I feel something is wrong," Xiao said hurriedly, with her back to Mai, staring at the thorn-black wind that was hiding behind a few trees not far away. "Didn't you almost cut off the tail of that thorn-black wind last time?" "I have observed, but there is no trace on the tails of these two thorn-black wind. During the last hunt, Mai's team almost used all of their strength to force that crazy thorn-black wind back. Mai almost cut off the tail of that thorn-black wind. The wound was near the tip of the tail. After 30 days, even if the thorn-black wind had a strong recovery ability, it was impossible for it not to leave any trace. But now, there was no trace on the tails of these two thorn-black winds. Chapter 46. Mai also noticed it, and he was also confused. Of course, he was sure that the two thorn-black wind in front of him were not the one he had killed last time. They would not provoke the thorn-black wind, but they had been hunting for years, and they had fought with thorn-black wind before. They knew about the thorn-black wind's recovery ability. That kind of wound was made by himself, and it would take at least 50 or 60 days for the thorn-black wind to fully recover. Besides, after such a long confrontation, Mai also felt that the two thorn-black winds were more and more suspicious. They did not seem to want to fight to the death with them. Some of them were injured, and the two thorn-black wind had many new wounds on their bodies. Fortunately, these two thorn-black wind were not as crazy as the one they had met last time. But, where was the one they had met last time? Was the territory taken away by these two thorn-black wind? "It seems that they just want to stop us from going up the mountain," said Xiao. "They can roar." Another middle-level totem warrior, who was about the same age as Mai, was confused. His hunting experience was no less than Mai's. He had met thorn-black winds several times before, and heard a lot about them from the older generation warriors. He knew more about the habits of these ferocious beasts than Mai and the others. It's not just the habit of dominating the territory. As killers who are used to lurking in the dark, the thorn-black wind seldom roars. Their signature is the sound of shaking thorns, not their roars. The warrior said quickly. Lang Jie and the others had heard the thorn-black wind's roars on the mountainside, so they went down the mountain to help them. So many strange things were put together, and they had to think more. What were these two thorn-black winds trying to do? In the twilight, the fast-moving shadows were a little blurry, and the shaking sound of the thorn-black wind came from the bushes from time to time. When the thorn-black wind was excited, the thorns on its body would shake, making a dense shaking sound. The sound was not loud, but because it was so dense, it was not hard to hear. In the dark night, the sound was like a death knell, and all the other animals around had already run away. Hearing the sound, everyone's hearts became heavier, and their backs were soaked with cold sweat. "We can't wait any longer, we have to get rid of these two," Mai said in a deep voice. The sky was not completely dark yet, so they could still see some of the surrounding scenery. However, as night fell, the dark environment would be extremely unfavorable to them. If they didn't chase the two thorn-black winds away and directly ran up the mountain, the two thorn-black winds might chase after them. They couldn't let the two thorn-black winds chase them all the way to their cave. Although the thorn-black winds didn't like the environment on the mountain, it didn't mean that they wouldn't chase after them. Besides, there were two kids in the cave on the mountainside. Go. After a short rest, Mai ordered the whole team to fight the two deer with all their might. Xiao Xian was dreaming again. After such a long time, he entered that dream again. However, this time, there was no night swallow or snowflakes in the dream. It was dark in the dream, but he could clearly feel a strong chill, as if something was hiding in the darkness. At the same time, there were some dense rattling sounds in the darkness, as if something was shaking. Xiao Xian suddenly opened his eyes and sat up. He touched his forehead, which was covered with cold sweat. Feeling the chill on his back, Xiao Xian shivered and moved closer to the bonfire. Looking at the burning situation of the wood in the bonfire, Xiao Xian guessed that it had been a while since Lang Jie and the others left. It should be dark now. Why hadn't they come back yet? What had happened? Was anyone hurt? Thinking of the dream, Xiao Xian took a deep breath and tried to calm down. The chill in the dream was much stronger than the night swallow last year. Xiao Xian still felt his heart was beating fast when he woke up. He didn't know whether it was because of the fear or something else. Xiao Xian looked to his side and found that Mao was leaning against the cave wall, sleeping soundly. Xiao Xian had made a lot of noise when he got up. Warriors who went out hunting were usually very alert and would wake up at the slightest noise. However, Mao didn't wake up. Apparently, he was sleeping soundly, which should be the effect of the meat. Well, in this way, he wouldn't be spinning around in the cave like a top. Xiao Xian felt that he had calmed down and his body was getting warmer. He added some wood to the bonfire and got up to walk to the entrance of the cave. With his previous experience, he knew that he wouldn't dream for no reason. He just didn't know what was out there. The boulder blocked the entrance of the cave tightly. It was hard for Xiao Xian to push it away with his own strength. Xiao Xian didn't plan to push the boulder away either. He didn't know how many dangers were out there. It would be safer with the boulder as a shield. The entrance of the cave was more than 50 meters away from where Xiao Xian had been sleeping. Step by step, Xiao Xian walked towards the entrance of the cave. His heart, which had just calmed down, began to beat fast again. The closer he got to the entrance, the stronger the sense of danger became. His hair was shivering all over, as if he was being pressed by a piece of ice. Xiao Xian's steps became slower and slower as he approached the entrance of the cave. Even his breathing became careful, for fear of making too much noise. When he was about 10 meters away from the entrance of the cave, Xiao Xian heard a series of close-knit clatter sounds. It sounded like it was ringing in his ears, but also like an illusion. A few pieces of wood had just been added to the bonfire in the cave. The fire was a little bigger, and the flame was dancing. It shone on people's shadows, and occasionally there was the crackling sound of the wood burning. However, Xiao Xian didn't feel warm at all. Instead, he felt cold. Xiao Xian opened his mouth and took a deep breath silently. After adjusting his mood, Xiao Xian tightened his nerves and stepped back quickly and quietly. Coming to Mao's side, Xiao Xian gave him a push. Although he was in a deep sleep, his subconsciousness was still there. When Xiao Xian gave him a push, Mao quickly opened his eyes and put on a defensive posture. However, when he came to his senses and saw only Xiao Xian in front of him, his face immediately turned pale. When he was about to say something, Xiao Xian quickly covered Mao's mouth and glanced at the entrance of the cave. Mao was not a person who didn't understand the situation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been allowed to follow the team. Seeing Xiao Xian so nervous, he knew something was wrong at the entrance of the cave. Opening his mouth, Mao mouthed, "What's going on?" Xiao Xian didn't have time to say anything. Looking at the top of the cave, he remembered that there was a secret vent above. He jumped up, stepped on the wall, and climbed to the top to search carefully. The cave wall was not smooth, and there were many protrusions, so it was not difficult to climb up. There were 3 vents. 2 of them were too small, and the last one was a little bigger, but it was blocked by a stone. Xiao Xian tried hard to move the stone away, and signaled Mao below to catch it. Mao was a little anxious. He didn't know what was going on outside. Mai and the others hadn't come back yet, and Xiao Xian didn't tell him what was going on. If it were any other time, he would have shouted, but now, after catching the stone, Mao carefully put it down, without making any sound. Almost at the same time, he heard a strange sound from the boulder at the entrance of the cave, as if something sharp was scratching on the stone. Mao's face changed. That scratching sound didn't sound like it was made by a human. The boulder at the entrance of the cave was moving. The evening wind blew in through the gap. The flames of the bonfire flickered even more fiercely. Mao saw his elongated shadow on the cave wall, which was distorted by the flickering flames. Mao had never encountered such a situation in his life. No matter how he used to show off in the tribe, or how he bragged about those thrilling hunting stories, he didn't know what kind of feeling it was until he actually encountered it. Except for the two of them, who had just awakened, no one else was there. No one would help them, and most of the creatures that got close to them were no match for them. When his grandfather, who was the chief, told him hunting stories, he once asked him, "Mao, do you know the feeling of desperation?" Mao didn't remember how he answered that question. He only remembered that he didn't take it seriously, because he didn't understand it at that time. But now, he knew. Chapter 47. As the boulder at the entrance of the cave continued to move, the clattering sound became faster and clearer. Hearing the sound, Mao had already guessed what kind of creature was moving the boulder outside the cave. Because of that, Mao's face turned pale, and his blood seemed to have frozen. He stood there stiffly, staring at the entrance of the cave. After checking the vent above, Xiao Xian jumped down from above and patted Mao on the back. Mao was so scared that he almost jumped up. With his lips trembling, Mao didn't know what to say. After all, he and Xiao Xian had just awakened their power not long ago. It was impossible for them to defeat the creature outside. The gap between their power was too big. No matter how brave they were, they couldn't deny the fact. Xiao Xian put on his machete, and signaled Mao to go up. He had checked just now, and didn't see any dangerous creatures outside the vent. Even if there were, they had to go that way. It was better than staying in the cave and being eaten. The boulder at the entrance of the cave was moved farther and farther away. The night wind blew into the cave, and the flames of the bonfire were dancing. Mao didn't have time to think. He tried to calm himself down, and followed Xiao Xian with his machete. Although the old hunters had told them that it was very dangerous at night in the forest, they had no other choice now. There was always a chance to escape from the vent above. But if they stayed here, they would die for nothing. They might be swallowed by the thorn-black wind before they could use all their power. The vent was barely big enough for Xiao Xian and Mao to get out. If they were older, they wouldn't be able to get out. When Xiao Xian and Mao went up, the boulder at the entrance of the cave had been moved away, and more than half of the entrance of the cave was exposed. The thorn-black wind was so excited that its clattering sound echoed in the cave. The whole cave was filled with the sound. The beasts in the forest were afraid of fire, but not all of them. Besides, the bonfire in the cave was not big. For the thorn-black wind, which was over 10 meters long, such a small fire was no threat at all. It seemed that the thorn-black wind didn't expect that there was no one in the cave. It was a bit confused, so it walked slowly. It stretched out its long, forked tongue and sensed the smell in the cave. Its eyes scanned the entire cave inch by inch like a radar. It felt that the burning bonfire was a bit of an eyesore, so it suddenly exerted force on its four limbs. Its whole body was like a black wind, and in the blink of an eye, it had already arrived at the bonfire and stepped on it. Bang! The thick horny scales blocked the burning sensation of the bonfire and put it out with a stomp. The cave instantly darkened. There was no one in the cave. The smell of the four-fanged black boar's flesh was very strong, but it could still distinguish the scents of many humans, many of which it was very familiar with. The thorns on its body trembled as it recalled the last time it encountered these people. Da-da-da. Zhenxi's voice was even more hurried than before. Outside the vent, Xiao Xian and Mao stood with their backs against the steep mountain wall. They were now hoping that the thorn-black wind would leave after it finished exploring the cave and didn't find anyone. When Mai and the others came back, they would go back into the cave. Holding his breath, Xiao Xian listened carefully to the sounds in the cave. Except for the occasional slight clattering sound, they didn't know what was going on in the cave. They also heard the sound of the bonfire being stepped on. They tightened their bodies, just in case. After waiting for a while, they didn't hear any other sounds in the cave. They didn't know whether the thorn-black wind had left the cave or not. The night was getting darker. Although it was not completely dark, the light was dim. And because of the angle, they couldn't see clearly what was going on in the cave. While thinking, Xiao Xian suddenly felt his scalp numb. A chill quickly spread along his spine, which made him shiver. He quickly moved 2 steps away from the vent. While moving, he pulled Mao, indicating that he should follow him and stay away from the vent. Mao moved his sight away from the vent. After 2 steps, he looked at Xiao Xian. When he was about to make a gesture to Xiao Xian, he suddenly felt a gust of wind behind his ear. The wind was so strong that it carried a cold killing intent. Mao felt that all the pores on the back of his neck were about to explode. Ding! The beast's claw was nailed to the mountain wall. The flying stone fragments hit Mao's body. His arm was scratched by a few sharp stones. Mao didn't care about the wound at all. He didn't have time to care about it. At the moment, he felt like his heart was being hammered. He didn't even notice when the beast's claw reached out from the vent. He didn't hear any sound at all. Everything happened too quickly, too quietly. If it wasn't for Xiao Xian pulling him to the side, and if it wasn't for the fact that the vent wasn't big enough for the beast's claw to fully extend, Mao would have been nailed to the mountain wall by the claw, or even directly slapped to death by it. The claw that reached out from the vent was nailed to the mountain wall. When it pulled out, the sharp claw directly pried out a big piece of stone. When the claw closed, the stone was instantly crushed. The beast's claw didn't catch anyone, and when it pulled back, it also scratched off a piece of the vent. The vent that was only big enough for a child to pass through suddenly became twice as big. Not only that, the beast's claw seemed to want to continue expanding the vent. Obviously, the thorn-black wind already knew that Xiao Xian and Mao were outside, and had its eyes on them. "Let's go." Xiao Xian and Mao quickly ran away. Such a steep mountain wall was actually not that difficult for them. It wasn't completely dark yet, and they just needed to stay calm and not make any mistakes. One wrong step and they might fall down the mountain wall. With their physique and reflexes, they wouldn't fall to death, but it was very likely that they would be blocked by the thorn-black wind behind them. "Which way should we go?" Mao asked. Because of what happened just now, he had more trust in Xiao Xian. After all, there were several times when Xiao Xian had sensed danger before he realized anything. "Let's go up the mountain," Xiao Xian said. This was also the question that Xiao Xian had just thought about. Mai and the others should be at the foot of the mountain now. It was a good idea to ask them for help, but if they ran down the mountain, it was still a problem whether they could successfully get rid of the thorn-black wind behind them. That big guy's sense of smell was too sensitive, and Xiao Xian didn't have the confidence to get rid of it directly. Besides, Mai and the others hadn't been able to go up the mountain smoothly, and he didn't know what the situation was like there. The situation at the foot of the mountain was unclear, so it was obviously not a good idea to go down now. There was another reason, which was just Xiao Xian's guess. While running up the mountain, Xiao Xian asked, "Is the thorn-black wind afraid of the cold?" Xiao Xian's question reminded Mao of something. "I heard that the thorn-black wind seldom goes up the mountain, and likes to stay in warm and humid places." While speaking, Mao also understood Xiao Xian's meaning. The temperature would drop a lot as they went up the mountain. The temperature difference between the top and the bottom of the mountain was huge. The place near the top was covered with snow, and the top was covered with ice and snow all year round, so there were not many dangerous creatures living up there. The real danger was the environment, which was very cold. As far as he knew, the thorn-black wind was very persistent about its prey, and had a very sensitive sense of smell. Once it set its eyes on something, it wouldn't give up easily. Below was the territory of the thorn-black wind. It was still night, when the thorn-black wind was most active. Going down was like sending oneself to the mouth of the thorn-black wind. They would either freeze to death or be eaten. If Mao had to choose, he would rather go up the mountain, where there was at least a chance of survival. It would be better if the thorn-black wind behind them couldn't stand the cold environment and retreated. Behind them came the sound of rocks breaking, which meant that the vent was getting bigger and bigger. Among the sounds of rocks breaking, there was also a rapid shaking sound. The thorn-black wind seemed to be getting more and more agitated. In fact, the thorn-black wind could directly go out from the vent, and then catch up with them, but it didn't do that. Maybe it didn't think of that way, or maybe it didn't think that such a narrow vent was a big problem for it, so it didn't bother to take a detour. Or maybe, there were other reasons. When Xiao Xian and Mao were running up the mountain, Mai and the others at the bottom of the mountain were also attacking, and the two thorn-black winds were about to retreat. Mai was overjoyed, but soon after, his expression turned ugly. The sound coming from the mountainside was not loud, but it was very quiet now, and with Mai and the others' extraordinary hearing, they could naturally hear the sound of rocks breaking. Mai heard it, and so did the others. Their faces suddenly changed. "Is it from the other side of the cave?" Xiao said in surprise. "Oh no. Xian and the others are still in the cave." Lang Ga's hand holding the stone knife trembled, and the knife almost fell down. "Go up the mountain," Mai shouted. This time, the two thorn-black winds, who were about to retreat, didn't stop them from running up the mountain. Without caring about anything else, Mai led the others and rushed to the cave on the mountainside. The sound of rocks breaking didn't last long, and soon it died down, which made Mai and the others even more worried. If there were sounds, they could still hope that the two kids were fine, but if the noise died down, it meant that the crisis was over, or, Mai didn't dare to think further, and just tried his best to rush there. When they finally arrived at the cave, their faces were all pale. With the strength of Xiao Xian and Mao, it was not easy for them to move this huge rock. Even if they wanted to move it, they might not be able to move half of the cave. With their small bodies, they could go in and out freely through a small crack. Of course, it was not the two kids who moved it. Moreover, there were familiar claw marks on the huge rock. Seeing the huge rock that was moved away, and the obvious claw marks on it, Lang Ga's legs went soft, and he almost knelt on the ground. Mai didn't have time to get a torch, and rushed into the cave. But at this time, there was only a mess in the cave. The cold wind that poured in from the hole and the vent made their hearts feel cold. Plus equals plus. Let's go to bed early tonight. Chapter 48. Damn it. It's that guy from last time. It's him, it must be him. Those two at the foot of the mountain were also found by him. Combined with what they had seen at the foot of the mountain, they had guessed something. They had never thought that the one they had met last time would be so persistent. Before, they only knew that the thorn-black wind was tough, but they had never thought that in order to attack them, it could find helpers. As the saying goes, it's easier to invite the devil than to send him away. The two helpers at the foot of the mountain would probably occupy this area. Last time, the thorn-black wind would rather lose its territory to take revenge on them. I knew it. I knew it wouldn't give up easily. Xiao looked at the mess in the cave, and her voice was full of depression. During the last hunting trip, Hoodlum naturally followed Mai's team, together with another kid. They were all led by several intermediate totem warriors in the team. According to the old rules, if an intermediate totem warrior led a newcomer, Mai wouldn't say anything. The other teams all did the same. Later, when they were hunting in the basin, Hoodlum targeted a small thorn-black wind that was alone. It was still daytime. Maybe the big one was sleeping in the pond, but the small one didn't. It was curious about the outside world, so it came out and chased a fox away from the pond. Hoodlum and the others saw it. Compared to the adult thorn-black wind, the newborn thorn-black wind was much easier to deal with. In the tribe, the newly awakened warriors would wear the trophies they had hunted in the previous year and compare them with each other during the snow festival ceremony. Although the shaman and the chief didn't include this rule in the ceremony, it had almost become a recognized practice. Hoodlum was satisfied to hunt a thorn black wind, even if it was a small one. That was where the problem came from. Hoodlum was about to make a move. With the help of a few other warriors, he managed to kill the small thorn black wind, but the big one came. That was the beginning of the trouble. The cub had been killed, and the murderer had been caught red-handed. The big thorn black wind went mad and chased after them like a madman. Several intermediate totem warriors who were protecting the cub could not fight against a crazy adult thorn black wind, so they hurriedly called for help. After injuring several people, they finally forced the big thorn black wind to retreat. Hoodlum did not take the baby thorn black wind's body away. If he did not leave the body behind, the big thorn black wind would continue to chase after them. The two people who were seriously injured during the last hunt were injured during that incident. If Mai and the others hadn't rushed over in time, those two people would probably have died. The reason why the few children who participated in the hunting last time, except for Mao, was that they were afraid of encountering similar situations again. Xiao Xian was an exception. Mai valued Xiao Xian's ability and hoped that Xiao Xian could adapt as soon as possible. In addition, Mai thought that Xiao Xian was more sensible and obedient, so he brought him along. Therefore, there were only 2 children in the whole hunting team this time. Unfortunately, both of them were in their hunting team. If something happened to them, one of them was the one who had awakened his power early, and the other one was also talented. He was the grandson of the chief, and the son of the team leader. If either of them died here, it would be a heavy blow to them. If both of them died here, they would be too ashamed to go back to the tribe, and they would not be able to answer to the chief and the shaman. It planned so much just for the 2 kids in our team. A warrior punched the mountain wall in frustration. Last time, they killed its cub, and this time, it killed the human cub. It would rather take the risk of losing its territory and lurk in the daytime. It even climbed up the mountains that it usually didn't set foot in. Sure enough, no ferocious beast could be underestimated. We shouldn't have taken this route. Mai regretted it now. He had underestimated the thorn black wind. There might be other unknown dangers in taking the new route, but if he had known this would happen, he would rather take the risk and take the new route. But now they had no time to regret. After checking all the traces, they divided into several groups and went up the mountain. But it was dark now, so it was not convenient to find people. They also had to guard against other threats. Xiao Xian and Mao almost used all their strength to run for their lives. For Mao, even with the totem power and enhanced vision, he still could not see the mountain path clearly at night. The 2 crescent moons were completely covered by the clouds in the sky, and it was pitch dark all around. Xiao Xian was in the front, and he let Mao follow him. At least, they could avoid some caverns and places that could easily get tripped. Stepping on footprints was a game that the kids in the tribe started to play when they were very young, especially the kids who lived in the mountains. The adults in their families even took it as an early training activity. It was not too difficult for them to step on the footprints in front of them. Now Mao was running with Xiao Xian, and even stepped directly on Xiao Xian's footprints. When Xiao Xian jumped, he jumped as well. However far Xiao Xian jumped, he jumped as well. When Xiao Xian turned to the left, he turned to the left as well. He could judge the terrain according to Xiao Xian's footsteps. This was a game that he had played since he was little, so it was not difficult for him to deal with it. If it was daytime, those footprints would only be the footprints of one person, and no traces of 2 people running would be found. Mao had many doubts in his mind. He did not know why Xiao Xian was so sensitive to danger, nor why he could tell where the caverns were in such a dark environment. The mountain was rugged, and there were many caverns. He could hear the sound of the thorn black wind stepping on the caverns behind him. It would sound every once in a while, and now it was much more frequent. Mao even suspected that Xiao Xian deliberately chose such places to run, just to trap the big guy behind him. And he had been running with Xiao Xian for so long, and he had not missed a single step. However, now was not the time to think about it. Xiao Xian kept running up the mountain. In his vision, it was not complete darkness, but a picture of different shades of gray. He could see where there were protruding stones, and where there were caverns, even if the ground was covered with a layer of snow. At this time, Xiao Xian was really glad that he had such an ability. Otherwise, if he stumbled on a cavern, the thorn-black wind would have caught up with him. The snow under his feet was getting deeper and deeper, and it was almost knee-deep. The temperature was getting lower and lower, and snow was falling from the sky. Xiao Xian felt that his face was frozen, and it was getting harder and harder to move forward. If it were not for the totem power, his limbs would have been frozen. But he could not stay like this forever. If he did not think of a solution now, it would be too late when he was really exhausted. He could not stay in such a cold environment for too long. Fortunately, the thorn-black wind behind him slowed down a lot. Obviously, it was not used to such a place of ice and snow. Even its famous stealth did not work. If he listened carefully, he could hear the sound of the thorn-black wind's footsteps in the snow behind him. The distance between them was getting wider and wider. Xiao Xian did not run up the mountain anymore, but ran horizontally to other parts of the mountain. He had no choice. If he went up, he might be able to stop the thorn-black wind, but Xiao Xian might also freeze to death there. Every time he went up a little, he could feel the temperature dropping again. Since the thorn-black wind had slowed down significantly here, Xiao Xian would not take the risk to go up. Xiao Xian let out a sigh of relief. As long as he ran for a little longer, he would probably be able to get rid of the thorn-black wind behind him. However, as soon as he let out a sigh of relief, Xiao Xian realized that something was wrong. The thorn-black wind behind them suddenly sped up and rushed towards them. The distance between them was getting smaller and smaller. The thorn-black wind, who was chasing after it, found this kind of environment to be really annoying. It wanted to retreat. It was not only cold here, but also snowy, which made it want to sleep. There was no grass, no trees, and there were many pits. Sometimes, it would step into a big pit and fall into it. It was a big snow pit. It was so cold that it wanted to roll down the mountain immediately. The thorn-black wind scales were tightly stuck to its body, to better insulate it from the cold wind and snow. Its movement was also slowed down a lot because of the surrounding environment. It was not even half of its usual speed. It did not even dare to stick out its tongue. It did not expect these two human brats to be so cunning. They actually ran up the mountain. It was the first time it knew that there was such an annoying environment on the mountain. No wonder the other species did not go up the mountain. However, it was not willing to give up now. It was already very difficult for it to sense the smell here. If it let the two brats continue to run, it might lose them. No. It could not let them go. It could not do anything to the big ones, but it must bite the two brats to death, and then throw them in front of the big ones. Thinking of this, the hatred in its heart became more and more intense. Under the influence of agitation, even the closed scales on its body started to shake again. Sorry, there is still only one update tonight. There will be 2 updates on Saturday and Sunday. Chapter 49. Xiao Xian could feel that the pursuer was getting closer and closer. Perhaps it had figured out that in such an environment, its usual stealth would not work at all. It was severely restricted, so it decided to give up on the last chase. After all, it would not benefit it at all if it continued to delay like this. The thorn-black wind was going all out. It burst out with its greatest power, staring at the 2 figures in front of it, and chased after them without caring about anything else. Every time it took a step, its big claws would pierce through the snow and nail on the frozen ground, making a bang 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 sound. Hearing the approaching footsteps, Mao's heart suddenly tightened, and he almost stepped on a protruding stone. Even if Xiao Xian and Mao both sped up, and even if the thorn black wind's speed was greatly reduced in such an environment, it was still the black wind killer of the forest. At this moment, when it burst out with all its strength, Xiao Xian and Mao could not be compared with it. A chill ran up his spine, and his hair stood on end. He did not know whether it was because of the cold wind or because of the chill on his back, but he felt like he was covered in an ice cave. "Get out of the way!" Xiao Xian roared. Xiao Xian and Mao avoided the huge figure that had already rushed over. For Mao, without Xiao Xian's guidance, he could not move at all in such an environment. Under the attack of the dark night and the snow, he could not even see the huge figure clearly. If the thorn black wind waved its claws at him, he had no confidence that he could dodge it safely. However, the thorn black wind seemed to have realized that Xiao Xian was the most important one between the two. After it missed the target, it turned its head to Xiao Xian, and its hind legs kicked hard. The snow on the ground was wrapped by a strong wind, flying towards Mao, while the thorn black wind rushed towards Xiao Xian in the other direction. It knew that as long as it got rid of Xiao Xian, the other little guy would not be a problem. Xiao Xian skimmed across the snow-covered ground, and quickly pulled out a short spear from his back. He twisted his body, and the moment he landed on the ground, he used the force of the rotation to stab towards the thorn black wind's eyes. The short spear was thrown out like a bullet towards the thorn black wind's eyes. The thorn black wind's reaction wasn't slow either. Although it didn't dodge the attack completely, it tilted its head and quickly closed its eyes with hard scales. The short spear did not manage to pierce through the thorn black wind's eyes. It only managed to pierce through the corner of the eye, which was blocked by the hard scales. Even so, the sharp stone spear still managed to pierce through the corner of the eye. The eye was more or less affected, and blood started to ooze out of the corner of the eye. With its eyes injured, the thorn black wind was even more furious. It did not expect that this little thing could hurt it so quickly. Xiao Xian could not see the blood at the corner of the thorn black wind's eyes. In his sight, there was a huge skeleton. Just now, he threw the spear at the thorn black wind's eye sockets, but obviously, it did not manage to pierce the eye. Even though he could not see the thorn black wind's eyes, Xiao Xian could still feel the fierceness in its eyes. In order to share the pressure on Xiao Xian's side, Mao also determined the direction of the thorn black wind according to the sound, and threw a spear towards it. Unfortunately, the thick horny layer on the thorn black wind's body and the thorns on its back formed a terrifying protective armor. The stone spear could not pierce through the tough protective layer at all. The relatively weaker parts were only a few parts on its head and a part on its tail. Mai had aimed at the part of the thorn black wind's tail that was not covered by the thick thorns. That layer of protective scales alone might not be able to withstand the attack of a totem warrior. The thorn black wind did not pay any attention to Mao at all. It was now staring at Xiao Xian. Because of its anger, it swung its tail like a hammer hitting the ground, making cracking sounds, as if it was hitting the reinforced concrete floor. Snowflakes and broken stones on the ground flew everywhere. Dodging the beast's paw from above, Xiao Xian pulled out his teeth knife to block the sharp claws coming from the side. Squeak! The sound of the sharp claws cutting through the teeth knife was heard. The sharp claws that could easily break the stones in the cave only left some shallow marks on the teeth knife. The knife was not a big deal, but Xiao Xian felt that every part of his arm was burning with pain, as if his arm was about to fall apart. Without having time to check the wound on his arm, Xiao Xian's calf muscles expanded and contracted rapidly, and he moved away from the original place to avoid facing the thorn black wind directly. But the thorn black wind was indeed a killer in the forest. It seemed that it had expected Xiao Xian's possible reaction. When Xiao Xian moved away, it whipped its tail at him. Xiao Xian, who had just landed, could not dodge in time. He only had time to hold the knife in front of his chest, in case he was stabbed by the thorns on the thorn black wind's tail. Bang! Xiao Xian was sent flying by this powerful force. After landing on the ground, he still couldn't stop moving backwards. His chest was shaken by the impact. If it wasn't for the fact that the thorn-black wind's movement was greatly restricted in this environment, Xiao Xian would have been long gone by the attack. This was the first time that Xiao Xian had encountered such a dangerous situation since he came to this world. Hunting was dangerous, and he had already prepared for it. But he did not expect to encounter such a ferocious beast on his first hunting trip. No matter in terms of physical strength or speed, Xiao Xian and Mao might not be able to compete with the weakened thorn-black wind. The choice of survival was either you die, or I die. The only short spear he had on him had been thrown out. He had brought 3 with him, but he had used 2 on the way. Now, Xiao Xian only had the teeth knife given to him by old Ku, and the 3 spearheads in the animal skin bag that he had not used yet. Mao did not stop making trouble for the thorn-black wind, but the thorn-black wind did not take him seriously. When he followed Xiao Xian out of the cave, he brought 7 short spears with him. He had already thrown out 5 of them, and the 6th one almost hit the thorn-black wind's eye. This time, the thorn-black wind finally looked in that direction. Now was the time. This might be the only chance. At this moment, Xiao Xian's eyes were full of killing intent, and the totem power in his body reached the peak. He suddenly stomped his feet and rushed out. However, Xiao Xian did not rush in a straight line, but changed his direction with the help of the stone spear that was stuck in the ground. The thorn-black wind did not expect that Xiao Xian would change his attacking angle. It turned around and stared at the place where Xiao Xian was standing just now. It waved its claws in that direction, but when it realized what happened, it found that the little man had dodged its claws. Maybe Xiao Xian's strength was not as strong as Mai, who was a mid-level totem warrior, but with the help of the teeth knife, he used all his strength to stab the weakest part of the thorn-black wind's head. The teeth knife broke the horny layer of the thorn-black wind's head, and went straight into its head. However, even though he had chosen the weakest spot, and even though he had used all of his strength, the blade still hadn't completely penetrated the thorn-black wind's body. Only 1/3 of the blade had gone in. If it had been Mai, of course the blade wouldn't have reached the hilt, and the thorn-black wind would have died instantly. Unfortunately, the one holding the knife was Xiao Xian, who had awakened his totem power only a month ago. Even so, the knife still caused a great deal of damage to the thorn-black wind. Xiao Xian wanted to use more strength to stab the knife deeper, but the thorn-black wind's claws were already coming. Xiao Xian did not even have time to pull the knife out. The knife was clamped tightly, and there was no time for him to use any strength. He could only dodge. Even so, Xiao Xian's back was still scratched by the claws. Luckily, he dodged in time, and the wound was not too deep, so it was not fatal. If he was half a second slower or hesitated, he would have been killed. A sharp scream pierced through the snowfield, and the surrounding snowflakes were shaken away by the scream. The thorn-black wind, who was stabbed in the head, roared out in pain. It wanted to push the knife away with its claws, but the place where the knife was stabbed was too delicate, and it felt a severe headache when it touched the knife. Its big claws were not flexible anymore, so it could not pull the knife out quickly. Instead, it made itself suffer from the pain that almost made it faint. Chapter 50. There were 3 spare spearheads in the animal skin bag. In fact, there was another big bag with more spearheads in the cave, but Xiao Xian didn't have the time to bring that big bag with him when he was running for his life. Xiao Xian put his hand out of the animal skin bag. Every stone spearhead in the bag was made by him, and he felt a sense of familiarity when he held them in his hand. It seemed that he could even clearly remember the trajectory and the effect of throwing them out. Old Ku told Xiao Xian that every stone tool had its own unique vein, and an excellent stoneware master could clearly feel that vein, which was the power of creation. At that time, Xiao Xian didn't understand that feeling, but now, he understood a little bit. The stone spear only had a head and no handle. It didn't matter, just use it. When the thorn-black wind was anxiously waving its big claws, trying to pull out the knife from its head, Xiao Xian used the spearhead as a dart, throwing it towards one of the thorn-black wind's eyes. 2 darts in a row. One of the spearhead slightly deviated, piercing the outline of the thorn-black wind's eye, but the other dart went straight into its eye. Roar, another shrill roar, which was even more violent than the previous one, echoed in the snow, and the whole space seemed to be about to be torn apart. Xiao Xian was thinking about whether he should throw the last spearhead in his hand towards its other eye, when he heard a cracking sound from afar, as if something was cracking. Hearing this, Xiao Xian's heart skipped a beat, but the following roar confirmed his guess. Xiao Xian felt that his head was about to explode, and he couldn't care less about the thorn-black wind. Follow me. Looking around, Xiao Xian called Mao and ran towards a direction. That place was higher than the place where Xiao Xian and the others were standing. When they ran there, they could clearly feel that the snow under their feet was deeper, and the wind was stronger. What the hell happened? Mao was confused. He wanted to ask Thorn-Black Wind a few times, but the Thorn-Black Wind was still some distance away from them. Judging from its voice, it seemed to be in great pain. It must have been severely injured. However, Xiao Xian was obviously in a hurry to escape. However, as the cracking sounds came from afar, and the booming sounds became clearer and clearer, Mao felt more and more uneasy. Xiao Xian felt the blood in his veins boiling. He had been fighting with the thorn-black wind, and now there was an avalanche. He had never relaxed his tense nerves. Using the totem power in his body had exceeded his body's capacity, and he was extremely tired. In fact, the most important thing to do now was to find a place to rest and calm down the increasingly uncontrollable power. However, reality did not give him any time to rest. Because of the thorn-black wind's roar, which made Xiao Xian spit out blood, it also cracked the snow layer somewhere above them. The cracking sounds Xiao Xian heard came from that direction. As the snow layer cracked, huge snowflakes slid down, accumulating more and more. The avalanche swept down like a flood. The thorn-black wind, which was about to pull out the sword on its head, also felt something. Its body froze, and it suddenly felt uneasy. It knew that a strange danger was quickly approaching the mountain. The trembling from the ground had spread from its feet to its whole body. Even though it was the dominant species in the basin, it could not wait to turn around and run away. Regardless of the sword on its head and the wound on its eyes, it could still sense the direction of the 2 little creatures. Should it go down the mountain? Or should it continue to chase them? Soon, the thorn-black wind made up its mind. It directly ran towards Xiao Xian and the others. Its intuition told it that if it followed the 2 little creatures, there should be a way to avoid them. Besides, it had chased them all the way here, and was even stabbed by the 2 little creatures. It was not willing to give up. It would be better if it could bite the 2 to death. Xiao Xian did not have the time to pay attention to whether the thorn-black wind was chasing them or not. He just wanted to hide behind the big rock, which was the only suitable place for him to hide in. The huge snowy body brought along a rumbling sound that caused the ground to tremble as it charged downwards with a ferocious momentum. Mao, who was following closely behind Xiao Xian, felt that his body was getting more and more tired. However, the crisis at the moment forced him to keep going. Xiao Xian had fought with the thorn-black wind in the front, so he had consumed more energy. Since Xiao Xian did not slow down, Mao could not slow down either. He gritted his teeth and kept following. The rumbling sound was getting closer and closer, making Mao feel as if the whole mountain was about to collapse. He did not know what it was, but the huge pressure made it difficult for him to breathe. Closer. It was getting closer. Xiao Xian rushed to the big rock, which was connected to the mountain. In Xiao Xian's opinion, it was the most stable place in this area. Hold the rock tight, and keep your mouth shut. Hold your breath later. Xiao Xian said to Mao. The huge snowflakes were getting closer, and so was the thorn-black wind behind them. Seeing the thorn-black wind chasing them, Xiao Xian wanted to curse, but he could not leave here. If he left, there would be no suitable place to hide. At this time, Xiao Xian kept praying in his heart, hoping that the avalanche would come soon and wash away this troublesome thing. The thorn-black wind also sped up, and was only dozens of meters away from the rock where Xiao Xian and the others were hiding. The mist-like snow had already rolled over, and the big mouth with sharp teeth was also biting towards them. However, the big mouth was one step too late. Take a deep breath, hold the rock tight. Hearing the rumbling sound, Xiao Xian closed his eyes. When the avalanche came, the thorn-black wind roared unwillingly, and Xiao Xian even smelled the fishy smell coming from its mouth. Just as the thorn-black wind roared, it was drowned out by the rumbling sound of the avalanche. After that, there was only the sound of the avalanche that made people think that it was going to destroy the world. Even hiding behind the big rock, Xiao Xian and Mao were still stuck in the snow for a while. After a long time, the rumbling sound gradually faded away, and the snow was all gone. Xiao Xian pushed the snow away. The cold air poured into his lungs, bringing with it a cold tingling feeling, but Xiao Xian could finally relax his tense nerves. The thorn-black wind was nowhere to be seen. Obviously, it had been washed away. Whether it was dead or not, at least, it was no longer a threat to Xiao Xian and Mao. Are we safe for now? Mao was still in shock. He had never encountered such a thing. For now, yes. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, Mao breathed a long sigh of relief. Just now. What was that? Mao asked after a while. His voice was still filled with fear. Avalanche. Avalanche? Mao searched in his mind, but he had never heard of this word. But he found a similar story in his memory. It was told to him by his grandpa chief a long, long time ago. But at that time, he did not find it exciting, and preferred to listen to stories about hunting ferocious beasts. Now that he had experienced it himself, he realized that sometimes, this kind of power was much more terrifying than ferocious beasts. For a moment, he even felt that the whole mountain was going to fall on him. They had escaped another disaster, but Xiao Xian and Mao did not dare to run around. Who knew if there would be a second avalanche? If that happened, they would be doomed if they could not find a suitable place to hide. They also did not dare to sleep, for fear of other accidents. In this place, they might not be able to wake up if they fell asleep. After resting for a while, Xiao Xian asked Mao about the thorn-black wind. Mao told him about the hunting experience last time. He had heard it from his father, and had not experienced it himself. But now, he had encountered the trouble caused by Hoodlum. Fuck. Xiao Xian cursed in a low voice, go back and beat him to death. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.